2, 1.
Hello and welcome to another podcast of The Gray Shame. This is episode number 40. What we're doing is going through the Crowley family case murders that took place in Apple Valley, Minnesota. And we're going through the book authored by Greg Fernandez Jr. called The Gray Stage. The Gray Stage. The Gray Stage by Greg Fernandez Jr. I think I started off by saying A Gray Shame. We also call it that, but it's also, so The Gray Stage is the book. And so what we're covering today is on episode number 40. We're on page 167 if you're following along in the book, page 167, and this is chapter number 16. We're joined with five folks today, including Greg Fernandez Jr., the author. Catherine Michelle is here with us today. Also, Matthew Nikolai, retired infantry sergeant. Welcome, Matthew. He'll be able to shed some light as far as David is serving in the military with him. And also Stephen Sanzeri joins us today. Welcome, Stephen.
Hey, thank you, Dan, and everybody.
And Stephen's the author of The Ultimate Prey, the book called The Ultimate Prey, the Yosemite murders that took place in Yosemite. And that's another very good book tying back almost to this one. No connection, but very similar as far as the strange response by law enforcement, strange response by the various law enforcement agencies to potentially clean up and fix and solve a murder, but yet we don't have it when the evidence is actually there. It's so good book there if you get a chance to read the Yosemite murders. But how are you doing today, Greg?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, my friend. Always a beautiful day.
So, Greg, this is chapter 16, the lengthiest. It's the final chapter of the book. It's 50 pages. This chapter runs through, and it's a good culmination of everything in this book. Once again, if you want to follow anything on this Crowley case, the best book out there currently is The Gray Stage that Greg wrote. There is no opinions in this book. It's just all laid out in facts, and anything that it says, states, it's backed up by the support of where the reporter was pulled from, the quote it was made by. It's just a straightforward book that allows you to come to your own conclusion. And so we're going to be starting off today with page 167. What we'll do is I will read the book. Basically, these series of podcasts are an audio book. And we'll read several paragraphs and then a comment and elaborate on each thing, just so make sure that the listener listening has a full grasp and understanding of what it is we're talking about, so they're not assuming anything. Is everyone ready to start? We've got a good episode, guys.
Absolutely.
Justice for Tony.
Amen.
So this is the bottom of page 167 if you're following along. If you're watching it live, you'll see it there on your screen. Continuing on, it says, when David graduated from college in 2009, Mr. Alam, now this is Kamel's dad, bought David a gray Toyota Corolla LE, possibly a 2004 model. Around the end of May 2014, according to a family friend of the Alams, Mr. Alam, quote, allowed David and Kamel to bring up his Acura passenger car so that they could use that to get around since they needed a vehicle. So this is 2009, a young couple here, just recently married, moved up to the Twin Cities in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, needed a car. Mr. Alam always got along good with David, and Kamel said, here's a car. You can use that to get around until you get yourselves on your feet. Continuing on, it says, Sidra's plan. Now, this is the sister. This is Kamel's sister, Sidra, who was living in Texas at the time. Her plan was to drive the black 2015 Toyota to her sister up in Apple Valley and take back her dad's Acura. Sidra walked into the lobby of the Apple Valley Police Department on October 18th, 2014 at 7:08 a.m. and spoke with Officer Karen Shaw, unit number 4918. According to the incident recall report, quote, Comp states her father sent her up here from Waco, Texas to swap cars with her sister. Now her sister won't answer the front door or will not answer the door or phone. Wants assistance getting father's car back. I advised Comp this is a civil issue since her father gave her sister the car and would need to take her to civil court, end quote. So what we've got here is a series of things. So
Well, we got a typo first of all that I put in there because I did say Citra's plan was to drive the black 2015, but that should say 2005 Toyota. That's the and yeah. So,
but was this
typo number
7:08 a.m., Greg?
Yeah. So if I got the timing right, because I know we have that information,
Okay.
so I should have pulled it from there.
That seems early. I know they
Does seem
that
early.
she drove up and then went to the house. They weren't either went first to the police department.
That's right.
And it says here that they didn't let her in or didn't answer the door. But I think she stopped first at the police department. She wanted to give them a heads up in case something happened at the site. And so she wanted to have a heads up saying that she took due diligence and in good faith was going to the police department to say, you know what, I want to make sure everything's on the up and up here when I go retrieve this car. And basically the officer just says, you know, go there and deal with the situation. If something comes from it, we'll get involved. But right now it's a civil case, a civil issue right now.
Yeah,
Any
I think the
questions
other.
on that?
Yeah,
Steve, do you have any? Okay.
Let me just say one thing here again, because the other thing was when David graduated from college in 2009, Mr. Lam bought him a gray Toyota Corolla, possibly 2004. That may be a 2005 too. So I had to write possibly. There's just so many different things with this cars that I just kept getting thrown off on and just trying to figure out. So we have a gray Toyota, we have a black Toyota, then we have Kamel's father, one of Kamel's father's cars. So those are the three cars that are involved in this here. Go ahead, Catherine.
On the actual police report, little doodad thingy that we have, it says that she went in there at 19:08, so it was 7:08 p.m., not a.m.
7:08
Okay,
p.m. So
now
another
that-
typo.
Yeah, that makes sense because they did drive up the whole way, and she was with her fiance Vinny at the time. And by the time they got there, I think they went to the Mall of America, which is in Bloomington, close by, the largest mall in America. Just as a side note, big parking, lots of places. She went there and just settled herself down. They went and just parked, and I think they were amped up as far as they did not know what to expect. And when I got the information, got it from her, is when I got this from her. This was from an instant message sequence, a direct message from Sidra and myself when she elected to talk and get all this out there. So this is first-hand knowledge from her information. As far as we're not making this up, not bringing this up out of the blue. The incident closed at 7:51 p.m. Okay, so this makes sense now. The incident closed at 7:51 p.m., but a second incident was created in the system an hour later at 9:07 p.m. This time, Sidra called 911. The dispatcher's name was N. Calkins. Quote, 10-21 to RP or responding party has more questions about vehicle. 28 called reporting party back and left a message. The incident was closed at 9:16 p.m. on October 18th, 2014. Stephen, can you tell the listeners, what is the responding, or when they call this the RP, and when they close the report and open the report and things like that as a former law enforcement, can you give a little background on? That's just law enforcement talk, is what that basically is, right?
Yeah, the RP is a reporting party. So that's a person that calls 911 or the dispatchers in that jurisdiction. And officers arrive and then they'll evaluate the situation. But, a lot of times they have blinders on, either they're rookies or they're, 3 months out of their 20 years left in retirement. There's a lot of things that are missed, and like I said, I'm working this big elder abuse homicide case that everybody's missed. And, with AVP and stuff like that, we'll go back to number 57 later on. Of course, fast forward to the bullet is, how do you miss a bullet in an 8-foot ceiling on a major crime scene? I mean, they should have scoured that thing with bristle brushes. So, they could find the call unfounded or whatever, but that's on the officers. And if something pops up the next morning on day shift and they got 2 bodies in there, that means those officers that responded to that call probably didn't do their job.
Thank you, Stephen.
Sure.
Continuing on, because this does get interesting as far as complicated, I should say, complicated. According
It's a,
to
I mean, it's a, well, maybe the other thing to note too is because I was trying to figure out not only when did Kamel's sister when did she drive out there? So it's a 15-hour drive, correct? That's a long drive.
yeah, they
To
left the
go.
day before and stayed somewhere overnight, and then completed the next morning and left, and then got into the Twin Cities area around noon.
Yeah,
Sometime in the afternoon, late afternoon, maybe.
okay. Yeah, for me that would be a 2-day drive. I'm not doing 15 hours in one day, but who knows? You know, they're both young there too. So I was wondering about that. And then yeah, the timing. As you can see, I did get one of the times wrong. It should have been, what did I say? It should have been 7:08 p.m. and I put 7:08 a.m. Yeah, because that would be a long incident that was closed at 7:51 p.m. Anyways, these are some of the reasons why we're doing live proofreading here. Sorry, go ahead.
Awesome. Continuing on, it says, according to Detective Gummert, Sidra, quote, Sidra stated it was decided that she would drive up to Minnesota to try to find out what was going on. She stated, according to her records, she arrived in Minnesota on October 19th, 2014. So this was right out of the reports that Greg pulled. He did state, Detective Gummert, that she arrived on the 19th. We know for a fact it was the 18th that she arrived in October 18th. So we've noticed little things like this that are wrong. And maybe he keyed it in wrong. Maybe he typed it in wrong. Maybe Sidra told it to her wrong. But nonetheless, the official report says she got there on the 19th of October. We know that she got there on the 18th of October. So it's little things like this that were never, really cleaned up.
And Gummert would have had access to that report to actually verify those days and those.
He could have went and looked it
times.
up and verified it. So I think a lot of this stuff, a lot of these guys, it just seemed like they winged it when they typed up their reports. They just kind of did it off the cuff. They didn't dot the I's and cross the T's. And I know, Stephen can attest to this. Go ahead, Stephen.
I was just going to say every single sentence, word, paragraph, phrase, prologue, everything that goes over the radio is logged.
Yeah. Okay.
Everything's logged. Yeah,
So as far as the sound, the audio, if they would have pulled that, they would have had everything anyway. But it just goes to show, I think they were just looking at their notes maybe, or just looking at their calendar and plopping in dates for these reports. But they have to be right on a case like this. And this also shows that at the time that it wasn't that big of a case. Wasn't that important of a deal for this whole operation when this was going on back then. This was just, they were batting their eyes and going on about their normal business. Is very low importance is what the perception I get from this. How about you, Catherine?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And it's not just the police reports that give different dates. Sidra gave a different date of when she showed up in the Death of a Dystopian article. She tells them it's October 16th. She tells Gummert it's October 19th, but yet we have proof in the call log that it was the 18th. So Sidra's story changes constantly, and why the police never followed up. And I agree with you, Dan. It had to have been because they considered everything just low priority. Don't worry about it. It'll work itself out, but it didn't.
Yeah, I remember, and Greg probably remembers this as when I was talking with Sidra about this, or communicating with it. I don't think I talked to her live in this situation, was direct message, but I said, I need to see the credit card receipts. I need to see the statement of when you were where. And she sent it. She sent the credit card, some screenshots and some PDF files to say, hey, we stopped for gas on the 17th. It was in Nebraska. We stopped and got snacks on the 18th that afternoon in Minnesota. So I knew that she got there on the 18th. They were on their way on the 17th. And then it shows them when they left and stopped in Albert Lee to a motel, another city in Minnesota before they left. That was on the 18th and then checked out on the 19th. So we knew for a fact from the credit card purchases, not the transaction, not the posting date on the credit card, but the transaction date that it took place, the credit card charges. So we're able to use that because I said back in the time when this was going on, there was a lot of people discrediting Sidra at the time, saying she's lying or she's making it up. And I said, in order for you to be credible, you need to send me those credit card receipts, not the receipts, the paper receipts, but the statement, just showing the list of the dates of when things happen. Because I said, we have to give you credibility when I was speaking with her, because no one's believing anything you're saying. And you are the sister in this case. And she's the one who wanted to come forward and expose this stuff that was just to kind of dot the I's and cross the T's. And I said, give me the screenshots of your credit card statement that you received. And she sent it. And I said, that's what's going to help us now get over this hump, because it is what it is. Anything
well,
else?
that's good to know, because I didn't even know she sent those. And I'll tell you straight up, I don't trust her as far as I can throw her. And I've had this discussion, I believe it was with her, but if she's going to give receipts, so it's like, if she has these, my main question, my main issue with Sidra this whole time is that, if she has these receipts and she can prove when she was there, because like you said, that gives credibility, then why does the story constantly change? And it's like, stick to it. We left Texas on the 16th. We didn't drive straight up for 15 or 16 hours. We stopped for 2 days, and it took why the drama of we left and we drove straight through for 16 hours and we get there 7:00 in the nighttime, go back 16 hours, and that's in the wee hour morning. This is my issue with her. And
that's a good point, Catherine, because there are a lot of people, including myself, that doesn't have trust in her as far as the things that she's stated and opinion and her thoughts on things and her beliefs on things. But as long as once we got the financial transactions correct, I also think that all of us here on the panel are adults and very detail oriented. She at the time was very young. I don't want to call her flighty, for instance, but she's not going to pay too much concern on the dates. I don't think. I think she just guessed whatever it was, and that's what she said, not knowing that we're going to scour everything with a white glove. If she would go back and say, "Oh, I didn't know these guys were that serious about all the details," I would have made sure it was right. I was asking these questions, and we'd get, like you said, Catherine, an answer here in this report one day. She talked to someone else on an interview. Another day it was mentioned. She'd do an interview somewhere else. It's another day. So we have all these dates, and we as a group spent all of our time reconciling all these things that were wrong. We spent all this time, and we could have been so much more efficient moving forward if we weren't trying to go back and correct and reconcile everything. And now I think if we were to talk to her now, she'd say, okay, now it makes sense. You guys are really interested in very detective type homicide detective details. She thought we were just armchair people speculating and conspiracy theorists that didn't know what we're doing. So she answered, I think, very quick, whatever she thought, just to get us kind of out of her hair. But I could be wrong there too. But at least I said, we need to create credibility as far as the transactions, the financial. I said, you used your credit card, right? Yes. Send us the transaction details so we at least know the dates and the timelines of all those things. But yes, as far as what happened now in the aftermath, yeah, she's someone that I don't think any of us trusts. It'd be nice to have her back on the show or an interview now as well. She's since married with children, and maybe her thoughts have changed. But she went way down another whole road we don't need to get into here. But she does believe David did it, and David's some bad guy, which is not the case.
Yeah, and I think there was a lot of people. A lot of the Gray State goons, as we call them, they were really hounding her during this whole time too. I think once she got burned by those guys and she realized that they were just frauds, at least in 2017, maybe some of her views have changed since that point. I don't know.
I'm sorry, Greg. I just wanted to interject with Dan. What he's saying is that, as a former police officer, when one of my first robberies was at a restaurant, and there was 80 people sitting there for dinner, and everybody described the suspects, the gun. It was, when the barrel was, this big, and so under pressure, that's one thing. Also, you're saying she's young. Yeah, she's not going to pay attention to details. She's spending money like a drunken sailor, and so. But when you call her when you get the red tape, which includes the calls to AVP, Apple Valley, everything else, you just fit those in there, because unless she has some agenda to or fro with regarding our mission, what is there any gain out of it? No, I think she just probably wasn't paying attention. But once you put everything together and start tying it up, her red tape and everything else may match. But in a crime scene or anything like that, I mean, the timeline is so important, and that's one of the biggest things. And that leads you into who was there when, the cameras on, not on, it brings it down. But timelines are very important. But Dan's right. She might have been young and wasn't paying attention. And I think you guys have the information you need on that.
Yeah, and to Stephen's point is, we meticulously had to go back with the details that we got then, and then build and construct that timeline. Then we all became comfortable, and okay, here's what happened on this whole October 18th situation, because that was very confusing. But we had to build that ourselves. It wasn't the people we asked. We all got goofy answers until we started getting the proof, I guess. And then we were able to back into the actual official timeline.
Yeah, there you go.
I did have one question, since we're kind of on this, for Matthew. Did David ever talk about his wife's family? I know he probably talked about his wife, but did he ever mention anything about his wife's family? I'm assuming he never talked about. No, nothing.
No, not really. I mean, David was a very personable person. He kept his private life personal, and that's just the way he was. He was very stoic. He only spoke when he needed to. So anytime we had conversations, it was always what we were working on at that time, or if he shared his personal feelings, you knew. It was just few and far between.
Interesting. Thank you.
Can I say something, Matthew? You served with him, and I never met the man. I know he's a great American soldier, and we salute him. But he definitely had. I would say, just from what I've heard I've watched your other interviews. David had plans. Am I correct? He was a talented guy. He was looking 10 steps ahead. So when he got out of the service, he was going to move on to something else. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. He was. One of the things while we were actually in country in Afghanistan, I specifically remember a memory when we were working with After Effects and with the Photoshop Creative Suite 6, and he was asking questions on how to use it. And
there you go.
his film career, and I had already graduated from the Art Institute of California, San Francisco, so I had experience with this, and I was just like, this is awesome. He's into filming, he's into special effects, and that's how we hit it off as far as our relationship was. So he was very goal oriented. Chess player.
People. So you graduated from San Francisco Art Institute?
Yes, I did in 2006.
People don't realize that costs as much as Stanford, man.
It was not cheap, but I tell you, it definitely opened doorways for me. And San Francisco, being the way I was raised with,
right.
Center, it was a definite moral compass shift in some respects, but. It just led me to what David was trying to offer the world, which was the truth. And I'm a third generation San Franciscan myself. Certainly. And it's just, he was so determined to go to Full Sail University. And when he went there and he was going through the process, and he would call me and we would have conversations about, hey, I need help with this, or hey, could you give me your opinion on that? Or I was always thrilled to get those phone calls, because we hadn't talked in a couple of months or a few years or whatever the case may be, and he would just randomly show up, and I was like, this is rad, And that's why I wanted to fail myself for my secondary degree and my master's degree, is because he went there, and I wanted to honor him. And it was
that's so cool.
That's right.
Hey, we do have our first question here, and I was hoping everybody could share what they think and why. So this comes from Blue Star Lily. Are there any folks making money off of David's Gray State? I'd like everybody to answer that, and also give if you have any thoughts on how you feel about people possibly making money or not making money off of this. Dan, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll just go first quickly. Is if they're referring to then the script, I think there was plans to make money off it. I don't think anyone right now is making money off of the Gray State at all. Not to say that that's not going to happen in the future, but I don't think, my opinion is, no one's making any money off it currently.
All right, Matthew?
No, I don't think anybody's making any money off it. I do know that they released a whatever fake cut of the original, and no, I don't think anybody's paying for that. So I do believe that Mr. Dan is correct, that when the truth does come out and it's able to be made correctly, that definitely it can help and prosper. So
yeah, so you don't have any problem with people making money off of it.
No, if it tells the truth, if it's the true script, if it's the true vision of what David wanted, the original, what I saw, then yes, I would definitely want that out there, because it's pretty much what's going to happen very soon in our country.
So you're probably not a fan of Eric Nelson's film A Gray State, sounds like.
No, not at all, because it's not the true vision. It's not what David wanted to portray what's happening in our society. If you notice, I'm not sure if he did it intentionally or if he did it just based on his philosophies. But I mean, if you look at the original Gray State trailer, you can see just little nuances of biblical scripture inserted in there, with, you know, not being able to buy, sell, or trade, the martial law, the way people are scanned with the chip and everything. It's all there. That's the true vision, the truth.
The truth. Catherine?
Well, I'm going to take a kind of a different approach to this. Are people making, and have they made money off of Gray State? I'm going to say yes on the concept. What I mean by that is those who did that sloppumentary made a pretty penny, and it was based off of Gray State. They're skimming money still off of David. David in his journals talked about how people were just like leeches. They were just sucking the life out of him and trying to ride his coattails to, you know, stardom or whatever. And I still see that even today. But at the same time, Gray State itself, what David's concept was, I don't think anybody has at all. And I kind of want to interject here. I've said this before, you know, in my previous job, I would love to be able to talk to David. Like, I wish he was still here and around, because I would want to know, how did he get who was his source of information? Because there are some things in that he has in his concept trailer, that was classified. How did he get that? And why would he put it out? But that's a whole different topic.
Awesome. Stephen, any thoughts on people making money off of Gray State then, now, and in the future?
Well, you know, most of you, or all of you know, I've been in the television business on and off. It's always been a love of mine, from being on the original pilot for Dynasty, which was called Oil in 1981, on to Bounty Hunters 96, 97. I was a talent in 97. I became a field producer. And then most recently, because of my book, I got the Hulu thing going. And I can tell you this, is even though I had 7.5 minutes cameo, and they found my book in New York and called me, and we shot it all in Yosemite, all I got was a stipend. There's no money in the documentary. Having said that, is, like Dan said, there was a script and everything else. $30 million movie, maybe that much. I don't think it would cost that much, but it was David's interpretation. And I'm not just saying it, not against Catherine, is he knew a lot more than he could say. He also was visionary. So it's like George Orwell, 1984. Look at how long ago that book was written. David had a vision. He's an artist, okay? And his first motive or mission was not to make money on it. It was to announce something, to have an agenda, everything else, which I still think maybe probably cost him his life, because if you look back, there was no projects and there's no major studios, but whether it's MGM, Universal, Samuel Goldwyn, whatever, Tombstone Entertainment, they'll buy the script and stuff, but they'll pay you what you probably made on it, that it cost you. But it's hard to get somebody to take a project like that in the politics in the world we live in now. And we go to Philip Haney and Philip Marshall, all that kind of stuff. But David was producing something more than a book. People are visual. You come out with a movie or a documentary or a film that is, like I said, I've seen Eric Nelson's thing, and Catherine's right. Not a lot of money, but A&E had some of this on there. There's some podcasts. Those representatives or owners of those podcasts, they made a few bucks because they're on YouTube or whatever. But my guess is that I think Eric Nelson chopped it up. I think he put his own stuff in there. It looks like Transformers meets, Sylvester Stallone in First Blood or something. No, it's not going to quite be like that, but maybe it was. I don't think that Eric Nelson had the right to take that intellectual property and to groom it and mold it into what he thinks it would have been, even though it's not that far off. It's really far off. So I think that finish it up. David would have had a hard time selling this, and it wouldn't have done him a good movie theater. It probably would have come out 20 years later, like The Artist That Dies, and it becomes a cult classic. That's my opinion.
Interesting. All right. Okay. That is a great question. Now, Dan, I'll send it back to you if you want to continue on. I'll pull up the screenshot here.
Yeah, it says here, according to Detective Gummert, quote, Sidra stated that it was decided that she would drive up to Minnesota to try to find out. Wait, we read that already. Okay, quote, Sidra stated that she had stopped by the Apple Valley Police Department, end quote. Detective Gummert continued, quote, to discuss a possible escort to the residence, however. She was advised that based on her information that she provided to the officer, it was felt the matter was civil and that we could not offer assistance at that time. However, Sidra stated that she was advised by the officer that when she arrived at the residence, if issues did arise, that she could certainly call 911 and we would offer assistance at that point. Now that makes total sense. They're just getting into the semantics there as far as what their responsibility is at a civil or a criminal side of things. So they just said, go there. We will provide if something comes up, but we're not going to escort you to the residence just for that.
Is it kind of interesting? Do people find it interesting that she doesn't just drive to the Crowley home, that she drives here first to the Apple Valley Police Station first, almost as if she knows there's going to be a confrontation or something?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with asking for a civil standby if you feel that it might be an unsafe situation, and that's what law enforcement's job. It's part of their job,
And this shows that Sidra felt that there was going to be some confrontation or something.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly, Greg.
But when you read David's journal, you find out why. I mean, there was a huge confrontation between Kamel and her family. They were fighting hardcore. And so, but yet Sidra tries to make it sound like David is going to be the protagonist and the person who's pushing all the issues, when in fact, the infighting was amongst the alums. David was an outsider. So that's where I find interesting that she's I need an escort. Why? Your family started it with your sister. That's my 2 cents.
I think that's spot on, because obviously when this book was written, I didn't have the Day One Journal, and we're just kind of going against what does the police report say, starting there, right? Then we get the Day One Journal and we're like, well, okay, well, wait a minute, something isn't matching up here. That's what it seemed like to me.
Top of page 169 begins, when Sidra arrived at the Crowley residence, David opened the front door to speak with her. She described David as skinny with disheveled hair, adding he, quote, looked crazy. Now that, I think, it's just an opinion that's pushing a narrative there that we don't need, but she obviously went out of the way to add that. Going on, it says, quote, David would not let her in to see her sister, end quote. Detective Gummert reported. Continuing, he told her to go to her car and he would go out to the car and he would come out to speak with her in the driveway, end quote. When David came outside, he told Sidra they did not want contact with her or the Alam family. According to Detective Gummert, David stated that he, along with Kamel, felt that they were treating Kamel's mother inappropriately. Remember, now she had the cancer, and there was some type of shady dealings going on with the situation down in Texas. Sidra told David that they were welcome to call the hospital and speak with their mother and hospital staff to find out if they were not doing anything inappropriate, end quote. Continuing, Sidra was told to come back in an hour to get the Acura. David added that she would need to take the Toyota as well. 1 hour later, Sidra came back to the Crowley residence to find the Acura parked on the street. Sidra parked the Toyota in the driveway. Any thoughts on that now, as far as the timing and the inappropriate? This was the cancer that she had, and going along with getting chemo and stuff, that brought the family to not agree on the treatment. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Greg?
Yeah. Catherine, you're muted, Catherine.
Oh, yes.
Probably better that way.
Yeah, go ahead.
According to the journal, that was definitely one of the issues, but there was a lot more other stuff going on, that they were infighting with a lot of internal, in-depth, ongoing things for a very, very long time. But I think that when Nyla got sick, that was probably what brought everything to the head. And with Kamel being the nutritionist and the naturalist, she wanted her mom to take a natural route because the chemo was just so bad. And so I just think that was just the straw. I don't think that was necessarily the cause. It was just the straw that broke the camel's back.
And the reason for the car exchange ultimately was that the car was given to David, and then they refused to pay the auto insurance on it. Mr. Alam says if that's the case, then if it's going to be repossessed or not going to have insurance on it, you're going to be driving it without insurance, then I want it back. You can have another car if you want, but I want that one back. That's what precipitated this whole thing. And so there was multiple things, like Catherine says, that all led to this whole, I don't want to call it a perfect storm, but the cancer thing really started exposing everything here.
Right. And the one thing that I think we're all kind of missing, and I missed it for a long time, it wasn't until Sophia brought it to my attention, because I lived in Texas for a couple of years, so I know how law enforcement is, especially with out-of-state plates. The black Toyota Corolla had expired plates. They expired July of 2014. There's no way that she could have driven that car from Texas all the way to Minnesota and never got stopped, especially in Texas. So my question is, did they tow it? And not that that's neither here nor there, but I will challenge her. I would want proof that she drove that vehicle without getting stopped.
I see.
Or proof that she did get stopped, some type of a ticket or something. I don't know. In California, you know how they are. It's very lax.
Texas is not that. No, Texas is, because when we were there, we had California plates when we got to Texas.
Mhm.
And in fact, they told us that we got pulled over because it was over 30 days. And we had to prove that my husband at the time was military. And we're like, well, we're in the military. They're like, we don't care. Get your plates changed. So they don't mess around. Texas doesn't mess.
Right. Do they give you time to change that before there's any?
Oh, because we were military, we were allowed. But this is a civilian car with expired, and not even a little expired. We're talking expired plates, months. Would have been pulled over for sure.
And it was in Kamel's name, not David's name.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. And how many states would they have to have gone through? You go to Texas.
Oklahoma,
we could pull up a map, but I'm sure it's like
Yeah.
6, probably.
Yeah. With,
States.
So they could have been stopped
Nebraska.
in multiple states, right? At some point. So,
Correct.
That'd be interesting to follow up on and see if they were stopped multiple times, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know in my search of people, and I don't want to say what I did and what I used, but I never found a ticket on that vehicle.
Now from Minnesota, that Interstate 35 leads directly into Texas. There only is one.
Oh,
interstate.
okay.
They never have to get off. They're never taking other roads. They're on the interstate and going straight shot. And so they would probably be able to make it pretty quick. But I think there's 5 or 6 states in between. I think if you look it up. My question is, what did they talk about when they mean was there shady dealings going on? What did that relate to? I don't get that. Anyone?
Who was talking about shady dealings? I got lost.
I just read it as far as Sidra says, you can call the hospital and talk to my parents if there's something that you don't think is appropriate. Now, I know they had the friction with the treatment, but she said that David and Kamel thought there were some shady dealings going on down in Texas about her care. And I just wanted to see if anyone here on this panel could expand on that. I'm not, because I don't know myself what that meant.
Well, it might be somebody's trying to get a conservatorship. Did the family have money? You got to look at that first.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Or
they do.
power of attorney, or
So
Our-
look at somebody. Look at somebody's going to gain being a conservator and going in or avoiding probate, whatever. But that's cancer, whatever. I don't know her age. 65 or older is elder abuse in California. But look at the motive on that.
Gotcha. So white collar, some kind of a criminal thing on paper.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's pretty interesting.
So it says upon getting into the Acura, wrote Gummert, she observed a picture on the driver's side of the car. The picture was of her mom, and her sister. So this is Sidra, Nyla, and Kamel, a photo. On the back portion of the picture was a note stating, "I will always love you and mom," and she signed the picture, Kamel. Sidra stated she felt something was wrong with what was going on, but drove back to Texas to advise her family of her findings. So, any thoughts on the photos there, guys? And what, I've always loved you, kind of similar to the text message left on the laptop. David allegedly wrote, "I've always loved you." Now, Kamel writes it. It's a photo of those three. "I've always loved you." What's thoughts on that, Catherine?
I'm so glad you brought this up because I think it was either in The Death of a Dystopian or in another conversation Citra had with somebody else. She then goes on to state that she then writes on the back of this photo, "I love you too," and then left the photo with David and Kamel. Now, this photo is nowhere around. You would think that if this photo was such a key piece of evidence, she would have either A, kept it, or somebody would have it and show proof that this exchange took place. But it's nowhere. It's was never mentioned again.
Correct. And that's correct, Catherine, because from an outsider looking in, we don't know if any of this has any truth to it. Was there a photo? Was there a note? Was there a photo at all? Did any of this even was any of this true? And so this is where it creeps in, this whole Sidra doubt that did she make it up? Because it certainly lends to the narrative that David was, controlling, and, she wasn't able to get out of the house and he wouldn't let her out, but she couldn't do anything and just wanted to say that, "Hey, I love you." This lends to more propaganda, what it feels like in my mind, that's being inserted into the case. But you're right, with a case this big, how come this photo has never shown up?
Yeah. And if she was so concerned, and this is where I really see the dichotomy between Sidra and her narrative versus what David writes in his journal. Sidra is making it out that David was controlling. Kamel wanted out of the marriage. She wasn't happy. It was a terrible situation. And then you read David's own words, and he's like, "God, this woman is so mentally strong. She's so smart. I can't get her to do anything. She's not listening to me. I'm telling her, stop fighting with your family, and she's basically telling me to shut up and go somewhere." I mean, clearly he wasn't controlling her. By his own words, he tells you that he was struggling just to have a foot and a say in the situation. And yet Sidra, it brings up this unwarranted drama and then with nothing to back it up.
Yeah, good point. Very interesting. Now, at the bottom of page 169, continuing on the last paragraph, it says, "All communication between the Alam family and David or Kamel stopped after Sidra's trip to Minnesota, according to Detective Gummert's report." So basically, she got back. Sidra says she's going to report all her findings, and evidently she did, but nothing was reported on that we hear of. All communication was cut off. Now, Kamel's father stopped paying the bill for David and Kamel's phone service. Top of page 170. Quote, "It was decided at that point," wrote Detective Gummert, "that the phone service for both of them would be cut off. They stated that they cut David's off completely and they limited Kamel's phone service at that point." Thoughts on that? Because we know at this point that because the insurance wasn't paid and the tabs weren't renewed, they wanted the cars back. Now they're also paying the phone bill, saying, "If you guys don't want to play ball, two can play at that. We're going to cut off your service." And so, no, this answers all the questions as far as why did David change his phone? Was he leaving the family? Was he isolating himself? No, they cut off the phone. He was forced now to go get another phone, another service, create a new service account, get a new phone number, and do all that in the middle of all this other circumstances. So yes, there was a perfect storm going on there with all of those things. Now, Kamel was still their daughter, so they said, "Look, we'll keep the plan on for you. We'll minimize it to whatever it was back then in 2014. Maybe it was a number of hours or a data plan of not to exceed 5 gigabytes. I don't know what the plan was back then, but they dropped her down to something as far as a bare minimum, I think, and they cut David off the contract altogether. Which, in my mind, if I'm Mr. Alam, that's all fair. All this is fair so far. They may not like it, but so far it's all fair. It doesn't have to result in crime, but Mr. Alam was not the bad guy here. Most of us would do the same thing in response to these types of things. But that's just what the family was going through. It's just a young couple. But they weren't doing it because of, we also get the other side of the story, Greg, what we've heard ourselves is the Crowleys were so broke. Alams had to pay for the phone bill. The Crowleys were so broke, they had to buy the car. The Alams had to buy the car, pay the insurance, get the tabs. He couldn't buy the tabs. He couldn't renew the car's tabs because they were so broke. So we're hearing this from the goons that they were financially unstable, which is not true. We know that Mr. Alam offered these things as a gift and to help out his new son-in-law, to help out his daughter. They didn't need it, but we see how the others on the other side of the fence are pushing and focusing on these things to claim that this is why all this happened. They didn't have money. They were in debt. David killed everybody because he couldn't get through it. That is a blatant lie. That's not true. They were not having financial difficulties, but he was making bad, unwise choices, one could say, I guess. And Mr. Alam just said, well, I'm not going to pay you anymore. You can get your own phone bill.
Isn't that kind of cool, though, at some point, if it's true that David's dad or that Kamel's dad bought a car for David? That's pretty cool. David's own dad didn't even do that for him. And then
that leads back into, we hear all the stories of the Alams hated him. David hated the Alams because they were Pakistani. He didn't like the foreigners. He didn't like this Islamics. We know all these things are false. But this goes to show once again for proof how much the Alams loved David, how much they got along with David and Kamel, how much they appreciated them, and how much they all got along. So they were all getting along very good.
Yeah, up until that certain point, and then it became a tit for tat. And well, you're not going to pay the insurance. I don't see. Again, that's hearsay. I see no proof that David didn't keep up with the insurance. Well, then they were fighting with Kamel and her family, and then all of a sudden now we have issues with the insurance. Well, since we did that, now let's take the phone away because now they say they don't want to talk to us, and I'm not. Because I think everybody at one point or another has that little bickering going back and forth within families. And that's what I see the situation. And then, David talks about in his journal where he was, he's like, thank goodness I'm doing these jobs on the side, making $75 an hour because now I can keep the bills paid until gray state. Like you were saying, Dan, everybody wants the narrative to be that they were flat broke, but clearly they were not.
The other thing to point out is, and when I spoke to Mr. Alam myself on the phone, is he even reiterated that with some of the disagreements we had, he said, he still liked and loved David. He says, yeah, we got into some things off to the side, but Mr. Alam was very clear to point out that I still love him as a person. I still loved him as a son-in-law. Do we get along all the time? No. We had some disagreements? No, but he never cut the line and says, okay, I'm done. You're an idiot. We're done with you guys. He made it sound like a very mature adult to say, there's some things we agree with, some decisions that were made. There's some retaliatory decisions that I made, but I still love the guy. That I have nothing against him as a person. I just don't agree with some of the choices. So I think it was very mature on the standpoint of Mr. Alam not to blur the lines between the love for his family and his son-in-law, but also setting a line in the sand by saying, there's things that you can't cross here in our relationship. So I'll put a stop to that. And I think David understood that too. He wasn't mad and retaliatory. They all understood as adults, functioning, mature adults, of what was going on. Did they have some things they didn't agree with? Sure, but it didn't impact their relationship as far as that. Now, when they got back, they didn't communicate. So there may have been something there said that say, let's let this cool off a while. We're not going to do anything. But I never got the impression from Mr. Alam that they ever even got into a fight. He just said we had some disagreements, but I never even raised my voice to the man, is what he told me. So, but Sidra's making it sound like there's all this backbiting and blood. It's just nasty stuff going back and forth, which I think, as a female, filtered it in. It perceived to her maybe that it was, and she was young and not mature. I think that Mr. Alam was handling things very good.
Probably.
She was very immature and young, and she may have thought that, hey, the world was ending because we weren't getting along with the in-laws. And then she, find out later that, she's probably going through that now herself, that everyone goes through that. You're going to have those.
I'll make this comment because I'm the female and I want you guys to get, jumped on by other
Yes.
women. But sometimes women are catty and they will just say stuff that's not true because it makes them feel better. And they blow it completely out of proportion, thinking that it's going to give them more attention. And that's what I see, Sidra, in this particular situation.
I can agree with that.
Well, as far as the actual podcast, I know Dan has to jump off here. I think that's a great place to stop this podcast. If everybody wants to continue on talking for another 20, 30 minutes, I would love to have everybody else on.
Can I ask Dan something real
Sure.
quick before you have to go?
Yeah.
Where can you direct me to find the bank statements that show that Sidra did leave and she was traveling?
I'm going to pull those up myself because I don't know. Greg, are they in the files section of the Justice page?
I don't think so.
I
And
think
probably
that-
because of privacy reasons.
So maybe a point for Catherine and the rest of us here is when I was getting data in and data was coming to me, I was kind of preparing the files I felt important, putting them into PDF format and uploading those. But I wasn't uploading every single piece of note that I ever received. So if I uploaded 70% of the data that I got, stuff like this may have been that other 30%, but I certainly haven't.
Okay.
I'll find it, send it to you. I'll send it to you, Catherine. And if that's the case, if it's not out there, I will also take the extra step of uploading it then, because it's very important. And what she did when she sent it to me too was she blacked out and she used a Sharpie. There's no personal name, address, account numbers. There's not on there. And I said, that's fine. We're not getting to that. And I think the part that I like, that I think Matthew will like, is when I was asking her these questions, I think she got also from me that I wasn't trying to steer some story. She knew that I was just looking for black and white. What's the answer? What date were you here? I don't care. I'm not trying to sell some narrative. And so I think she got that from me, that, hey, these conspiracy theorist folks are asking me all these questions. They must be in it for some reason of their own. And by having the conversation back and forth with me and her, left her that she knew that I wasn't in for anything. I said, I just want the facts. I don't care what anyone thinks or what actually happened or not. I just want to know what happened. And so she got that from me. I think the sense for me that we're not trying to push some fairy tale. We're not trying to push a narrative here. So I said, I just want the statement. That's it. I'm not going to do anything with it. You can hide your name. I'm not trying to do anything with it. Cross it off. We'll publish it. So I'll get that off to you, Catherine, and I'll post it. But feel free to stay on the rest of the show, guys. This is an important topic. It's very interesting, all what happened here in October of 2014, because 2 months later is when everything goes down. And for what I view as completely different reasons in December, is this whole escapade in October that took place. That was very impactful, but nothing that would relate or end up or result in a triple homicide. I don't think. I think there was some financial family disagreements and things, family, not financial, but nothing that was going on at the other time, at the same time that was going on with Danny August Mason and some of these goons that were going on. That planning was in the works of a triple homicide already 60 days before the bodies, before the Christmas, and that was in this very same time. So that's what's going on. They're fighting this cancer issue, and this, we don't like the chemo, and these little small things that are so minute in the big picture now, which were so big to their family back then. That David has to realize that his own brother was planning a triple homicide while all this was going on the other side of the family. That was, in my opinion, I'm going to clarify that as my own opinion, but the $50,000 withdrawal was done on the same day, right? It wasn't the 18th at a bank in Minneapolis. It was with $50,000 cash withdrawal was the 18th of October.
From an account that wasn't his.
From a trust fund that his dad owned, who was in Germany. So that's why this is so important, because they're fighting and clawing and scratching on these little cat fights over here that were big momentous things, which were very small in scope. On the other side of the family, his own family was, I believe, planning the demise already at that time to kill these people off so the script could land in their lap. Do you see how huge that is?
Dan, you're so right? All these cases I work that end up being homicides or elder abuse, It starts financially. Okay, it's always the caregiver related to the victim who's 88-year-old dementia patient lives there. Money's missing, and the dementia patients sometimes the light bulb goes on. They get into an argument, whatever, and now we have a deceased 80-year-old. Money is the motivator. What's the motivator? And these guys like Danny August Mason, or even Eric Nell, anybody's trying to make money off of this doesn't realize that there's not that kind of money in this. This isn't Gone with the Wind, man, you know? And so they don't understand the business of Hollywood, LA, whatever. So chances of them making money on David's project are probably rare to none. But they don't know that because they're naive to that system. But
and that's why I think it's very important to have a true documentary made on this case to show the timelines of all these things going on in the background with the date at the bottom as you see it, and the location, Minneapolis, Minnesota, you know, withdrawing funds. Waco, Texas, we're arguing about hospice care. But this is the same days.
No, that's what I'm saying. The case, Dan, let me go. I was going to say, it's the case I'm working now. There was $1.7 million that the granddaughter signed on when the guy had dementia that traded $1.7 million into an aggressive trade account, and she signed on it. It's money, Dan. You're right.
Yeah, it is. All right. Have a good week, guys.
All right, buddy.
Happy anniversary, Dan.
Yeah. If I may, I just toss this in there for the whole $50,000 and the option, the different accounts and everything. You know, it comes to something that I use on my TikTok a lot, which is called CODE, which is CKOWDE, which is controlled, knowledgeable opposition who does evil. So you have to think that these people had it premeditated way before the fact, because they knew that not only was David going to showcase the truth of what's going on in the world right now, but he was going to make a lot of money doing it. And it was going to be, I mean, if you look at some of the interviews that he had with the different film studios that he was talking to, I mean, National Geographic was interested, and many different motion picture theater companies were interested in it, because it was something that people weren't doing. They weren't showcasing what was really happening in the world. Look at the movies that were out at that time. You had some of the Avengers movies coming out and some of these, you know, far-fetched sci-fi type, you know, fantasies, but no real concrete evidence of what's going on in the world. And that's what David was doing. So this was all
No, you're right. You're right. He was. I know from the business that, I mean, it's tough to make a lot of money on any project, but those other guys they had green eyes. They were a little naive to this, and David probably would have done well if it would have got launched and got greenlit independently or whatever. Like I said, no major studio will take this because it's Democrats. But I'm saying that is that there's still a motive, whether they're naive or not. And the $50,000 taken from a trust, that's the oldest profession in the world, you know.
It just, I mean, and anybody who's law enforcement, or anybody who has military experience knows that you follow the money. You
always. Yeah.
And it'll lead you right to the source. And it could be as simple as someone's bank account, or if they're smart enough, they'll do it other ways. But
exactly. Yeah, you know, you look at the closest. Who was the closest to David? Danny August Mason and that other cat, or whatever, the people around him and stuff like that. And then there's also a trust fund thing. So there's a lot of players in that. But my since we're still on here, I told Greg this the other day, I still think that since this crime scene is so sloppy, the dog didn't chew off the hands. We all know that kind of stuff. And that it was a black ops, shadow ops deal, because he's the only guy coming out at that time with something that might ruffle a lot of feathers.
Absolutely.
And I'm not kidding when I say that some of the things he's talking about at that time were classified.
Yes.
And
yes.
in my job that I had, and again, I don't know lots of great big secrets, but I knew some, and they, you know, little things. And there was stuff, and I'm not going to say what he was talking about, but when you see that and you know it's classified, I want to know, how did he know that? And how did he get that in his script?
I might have an answer to that.
Yeah, Matthew knows.
I might have an answer to that because it's very interesting that you guys are mentioning this, where he got the information, because a few years ago during this process, after he was murdered and after the fallout and everything, I got some very strange messages from people on TikTok talking about them being pursued by the FBI, them saying that David had access to information about some very interesting things that are talked about in the world right now. And I'm going to go through my old messages. I'm going to retrieve all those and I'll send them to you guys and get those out there, because this person was terrified about the information that they knew. And the information David had allocated over his research for the project would drastically change people's perceptions of what really happened.
You're exactly, you got it in a nutshell. It's just like that 21-year-old, well, National Guard, whatever he was, that last leak we had, that just shows that, I mean, you could be an E4 at 21 if you're in the right situation, whatever it is. But is that there's a lot of people that shouldn't have classified information. David, Matthew, you're in the military. There's things you can't talk about, and whether you had classified information or that kind of clearance, it's just part of the code. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I had the highest clearance that I had was a secret clearance, and
oh yeah.
I mean, it's nothing to joke around about. I had officers in the military get in trouble with their computers, with CID and all kinds of things by doing just like mistaking the government computer for their personal computer, and then they would get their computer seized and searched. I've seen that happen many times in the military.
Yeah, ask Hillary Clinton.
Right.
We could ask her, but killed for asking.
No,
Yeah, right.
What I want to go to, hey, Greg's back up.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Stephen.
I think to keep our audience going on this, because I know it was probably a little bit light for them, but I think we need to still talk about motive and who are the players at the crime scene. Catherine, with her friend who's like a pathologist with postmortem lividity and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of questions there. But absolutely. one of the big things with Greg and stuff was, AVP not testing the dog feces, things like that. There could be the dog could have licked some blood and stuff. We know it didn't eat the hands off everything else. But the thing I still with Greg the other day on the phone we were speaking is was it number 57 was the bullet in the ceiling, Greg? We talked about. You know what? Matthew, you know as well as I do, man. One shot, one kill. And David was an expert. There's no way he put a bullet in the ceiling that didn't have any DNA. I mean, he wouldn't have missed. I mean, why? What's that doing up there? That's my biggest takeaway on this thing.
Big thing. And then along that topic too is that when I was sitting at my computer and I actually saw the headline that the murder had taken place, my first reaction was, this can't be real. Like, this is not something David would ever do. And I started scouring every report I could find. And the first thing that just blew up in my mind as former military was that the back door was unsecure. That was the first thing. And I was just like, no way. There is no way in all of my years knowing David or anybody else that's been in the military or former police officer that they don't secure their doors or their windows.
Even as a former police officer, and I didn't serve or anything, but is that even now I'm sitting here in the middle of the day on a Saturday and my doors are locked. Why make it easy for somebody? And it wasn't because Dave was paranoid. That's just being smart. That's being alert, I mean, so that's exactly right. And plus, if you're leaving, the other thing too, Matthew, is that when they do these kind of things, they kill the dog because the dog is going to bark, alert, do whatever. So this hit was done by amateurs that were guided by a black or shadow ops team. That's my narrative, or Matthew. That's my narrative.
No, I agree in the respects that it was definitely done by somebody who didn't know what they were doing exactly, and they were being controlled. I mean, it's just clear as day. You can see that these people performed the actions and made it look like it was some, death, suicide, murder, suicide. When in reality, it was all set up. I mean, every fact and like points to it, the bullet in the ceiling, the back door being unsecured, the way David's body had fallen to the ground or been readjusted to fall on the ground. I mean,
the weapon on the other side. Also, what Greg brought up, which I didn't realize till we spoke a week or two ago, was when the neighbor dialed 911, she called it in as a suicide homicide. Now, I've had maybe 20 homicides in my life and been on scenes. If I look at 3 dead bodies, I'm thinking homicide. I'm not saying, oh wait, that's a suicide homicide. No,
Yes.
and this lady's an amateur. So she looks through the window, dials 911, and says, "You got a suicide homicide." She was coached.
Your average citizen doesn't speak like that. They don't use that type of language.
Nobody does. She was immediately coached with some with some men in black that knocked on her door and said, "Hey, you know what? Whatever. They needed somebody to call this in because the longer the crime scene goes and the more lividity and everything else, and maybe they don't pick up on what their agenda could be. But that neighbor saying it's a suicide homicide, that tells me that's a big red flag in a
very specific information. I mean, look at the language. It's not like, if somebody calls, they're going to say, I think there's gunshots and someone's getting hurt over here. They're not going to be very specific to the saying, I think it's a murder suicide. Like, where do you get that kind of logic?
Yeah, I mean, I never heard that. I was 10 years in EMT working in an ER when calls coming in. So for 10 years of getting this stuff, never once heard somebody say that in a call.
I remember distinctly in Afghanistan, we had an E7 who tried to commit suicide on the tarmac when we were going back to FOB Ramrod after I got back from mid-tour leave. And he somehow, I mean, it's not hard, but he somehow got around and in his chamber, and he set it off and he hit himself in the shoulder. And I mean, there was hundreds of people on the tarmac, all right, waiting for us to go back to FOB Ramrod. And I mean, CID pulled at least 50 people in that vicinity and got us down to about 7 or 8 eyewitnesses who saw what happened. I was one of them. And we're all put in a room separated from everybody else. And CID conducted their investigation and found out what was going on. I mean, that was like it was just a well-oiled machine.
It was accidental shooting. It happens all the time. When you play with firearms for a living, people do get shot,
Yeah. Oh, he was definitely trying to hurt himself. Yeah, he even stated it. And it just goes to show you the vast difference between what happened right there within a matter of minutes in comparison to this case, which has been just a lot of it's falsified.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to actually formally introduce Eric Spitfire Wilkinson. Thank you for joining us here.
Hey, buddy.
Nice to meet you.
You're muted.
You are muted, which is
Thanks for having me.
yeah, awesome. Thank
Appreciate
you for
it,
being here. If you have any questions, please feel free to just join this talk here that we're just having.
This has been one of I've been involved in broadcasts with Greg and Catherine for almost damn near a decade now on this topic. But this is Stephen. You were spot on saying this is a black ops operation, without a doubt.
It sure was.
Just looking at my my notes here, Catherine, you said women are catty, and a lot of the men out here are catty too.
I know. At that situation, though, Dan was trying to be so delicate, and I'm like, I'll just say it.
You can see it in his eyes too. I noticed.
Are there any state differences here? Because I know, Eric, you're in a different state. We're all in different states almost.
Matthew and Stephen, real quick, just your backgrounds, real quick.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Stephen.
Oh, I'm former police officer, San Jose Police Academy, 1981 graduate, and then went on to Burlingame Police Department in the San Francisco Bay Area, and then Foster City, and I worked dope, and I worked Detective Bureau, and then had a Gold's Gym, and after that, I got into the country club business, onto the bail bond business for 12 years, and became a bounty hunter, and still to this day, still do some PI work.
Cool. I'm a ranger, a park ranger, and currently we have somebody working there who's just retired from the police force, and he did narcotics. And wow, talk about an exciting life, a very exciting life, but nonetheless, cleaning up the streets.
Yeah, there you go.
And yourself, Matthew?
Yes, sir. I'm a retired Army Infantry Sergeant, 11 Charlie, Mortarman, High Angle Hell, as they used to say. And now graduated from the University of California at San Francisco in 2006, master's degree from Full Sail in 2014 in August. And now I'm just speaking Yahweh's truth to anybody who will listen about our Messiah. And
Where have you guys been? Where have these guys been, Greg, Sophia? You guys,
go ahead, sir.
every show that happens, that Greg puts on, I learn something new. And once again, I'm learning new things from both of you. Not only am I learning things from both of you, but you're bringing credible facts and credible data from credible sources.
Well, I appreciate that. So, it's anybody can claim to be an expert. Anybody can. And if you put somebody in a lab coat, people believe them more. For some reason, we believe in Bill Nye for the last several decades. You know what I'm saying? But it's like, the truth is this: justice is going to come because no darkness can escape the light. The longer you, and Jordan Peterson said this best, the longer you stare into the abyss will stare back, but the light will always come through.
Yeah.
So nothing in this will ever be hidden forever. The truth will come out. And the more and more we probe at it, the more and more we use facts, deductive reasoning, and logic, we're going to find justice for David and his family. And that's what we need to pursue.
Amen. I couldn't have said it better. Amen.
Well,
I'm
go ahead, man, please.
you're going to have to tell me to shut up, and I will never
Never.
say shut up, stop talking.
Never,
But
man.
I want to kind of go back to the motive and the letter that Danny August Mason wrote to David. The audacity and the nerve of this man who's putting in this letter, he's demanding 10% of the gross profit, or gross, not profit, but gross monies made off Grace.
That's gross. It's very gross.
It is. I'm like,
Yeah.
David wouldn't even get that. The people funding it won't get 10%. And he's demanding 10% before he signs anything. Talk
Right.
about greed. And
Crazy.
it all, like Stephen was saying, follow the money. And you have Dan Jr., who goes and takes out the 50 grand loan. You have Danny August Mason demanding 10% of whatever's going to be made, any money's made. And it's like, dude, your ego is so huge. It's phenomenal. And so we have so many two or three paths to follow. And that money, when you're following the money path, it leads to those closest to him, his family and his friends. Well, friends.
Came across something yesterday on TikTok from a preacher that really struck me. It says, you can have family that's your blood, but that doesn't mean you share the same spirit. And that's true in my life, and that was true in David's as well. It's just like, people can be, you can have a brother or sister, a mother or father, but that doesn't mean that they love you the way you love them.
Well, as someone who's adopted, I can resonate with that. There's things that people make absolutes, and nothing's absolute in this world.
No, except the energy that encompasses our body from one great Yahweh.
Amen.
Yeah.
This is what we need to be doing, is not be afraid to speak about what true justice looks like. And that's not picking up the sword. That's not picking up the rifle. It's using our words. When we're needed to actually fight the enemy physically, we'll be told. But this is what we need to do with what we're experiencing now, is tell people the truth. And the truth is that David and his situation needs to be shown the light that it is. It's been shrouded in darkness. Black ops aside and everything else, the truth that he was trying to convey to everybody was that the world is in turmoil and we need to find a way out of it. And the only way out of it is to unify.
And the truth will set you free.
Right?
What was that, Eric? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
Oh, he's talking about showing the truth, and the truth will set you free. My truth actually put me in a prison and thanks, Greg, for having me on again, because I'm banned from YouTube. I'm not even
Are
allowed.
you really?
For
For the seventh time now here?
No, I'm completely banned. If there's any way that I can get a show going, it would be to use somebody else's number, somebody else's email. So I've been essentially banned, like many others who have told the truth, like David Icke, like Vinny Eastwood, who's currently facing a lengthy prison sentence just for protesting in New Zealand. But digressing again, like many of these people who have been silenced, and Greg has this great passion for David Crowley, as I do too, as it seems like you two do. Where have you been? And keep doing what you're doing, because this movie would have blown this movie came out way before the elites wanted us to see this. That was the problem. And he was an independent movie maker about to show us things. I think we can probably all agree. It seems like you're very awake, Matthew, obviously, and I know Greg and Catherine are too. They show us things before they do it, but they weren't ready for David to show this yet.
No.
And so he had to be silent, because they were talking about the surveillance state. He was even talking about geoengineering, and he was most definitely talking about a bioweapon. Greg gave me both endings, I think 3 different endings of the book, and they were talking about a bioweapon that would cripple the world. What did we just go through? I mean, Greg was spot on in following this, because he saw that David Crowley was a visionary, quite possibly a prophet, but that might be taking it to a different level. But this movie did not get made because of why? Because none of us believe the official narrative. It stinks. There's 10,000 reasons why it didn't happen the way Apple Valley Police presented it, and only a couple why it did. And I'm just glad to see people are still keeping this fire alive, because David Crowley is a hero to myself.
Well, and like Matthew was saying earlier, David himself, with his own words, is vindicating him against the narrative, because when you're reading his words and you compare what he's saying and how he felt about not only his family, but about the world as it was, it is in complete opposition to what the narrative is stating. He wasn't a man that was bitter and angry and was snapping and was controlling. He was a man who had a heart where he said he cried for hours and he couldn't stop because, and he couldn't control it. But he's crying because he saw where humanity was going. He was a totally different person. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's exactly why the narrative fails. It's David's own words.
So because we have Matthew and Stephen, who I've never met in the panel, I would like your take on MK Ultra and the type of direct energy weapons they have. I've looked at a lot of these people are just nuts that believe this is happening to them, and that kind of sucks. That kind of takes away from it. But these weapons, there's hundreds of patents for it. They do exist, and that was one of the things I've always brought up when we were talking about this, is that the only reason that this man did this is because of something to that nature. What do you guys think?
Oh my gosh. Saying that David was under MK Ultra and that's why he did this? Wow.
Possibly. It's one of the many possible reasons why this could have just been a straight up assassination. I guess I'm putting out there that these weapons do exist, and what better person to use it on than him?
Right. David was not under any of my control, that's for sure. But as far as the idea of it, I can give you some history of what I've learned over the years. Is that
yes, please.
You guys remember the original Tetris game that was made in 1984, 86 for Nintendo?
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you look into the actual history behind that game, it was actually designed for mind control, because it is used with the different frequencies of the music and the movement of the blocks and everything. It's pattern recognition at a high speed. And the refresh rates on the old TVs would cause you to stare at the screen a lot longer. And you would sit there and concentrate on it, and you would phase out. And that's what the Russians used back way in the day to train their soldiers.
Now, Matthew, why do you believe that it couldn't have been used on David Crowley?
Because I knew David personally. I knew him.
You did? Okay.
I mean, when we were overseas, I mean, I had conversations with him constantly. And I mean, he never exhibited any type of mind control or not being in control of his
Right. Up till the point where he decided to murder his whole family himself and write Allah Akbar on the wall. That's why I hypothesized that it could have been possible that they just zapped the fuck out of him. I don't know. But I just wanted to hear your take.
As far as direct energy weapons are concerned, I mean, I have video upon video and information on those on my TikTok, and it's like they exist. And it's when they speak of it, we're not just talking about just direct energy weapons that are up in the atmosphere. We're talking about weapons that are done with electromagnetics. We're talking about weapons that are made with plasma or liquefied glass that are
Right.
electromagnets at supersonic speeds. I mean, they're on naval ships. You have guys explaining these military weapons in extraordinary detail about they're virtually silent and they can travel great distances. And before you even know you're being hit by one, you're already at a ciclet rate. They're already firing more shots at you.
And where it gets
You're exactly right.
go real quick, where it gets conflated and it changes that a lot of mentally ill and black people out there who are claiming this is happening. So it takes away from the legitimacy of this actually going on with those type of people.
Well, you look at the Manchurian Candidate. Sinatra was in the first one, and then Denzel Washington, and the other guy was in the last one. But you watch the Manchurian Candidate, then you go to Jolly and MK Ultra, and they had the hookers in San Francisco. That leads all the way to the Mansons with the MK Ultra. Yeah, that stuff might have been going on. But what I kind of agree with Matthew is if you're a Manchurian Candidate, there's going to be something when you serve. It's like football when I play semi-pro or when you're a cop. You know what these people better than your family, and so if something's going on, you in that perspective of your service, I don't. Look at the Havana syndrome, where they used RF for energy pulsating signals and then people test. It was on 60 Minutes and totally believable. And Matthew knows more about than I do, but if they want to get you, can they do that with energy weapons? Yeah, they probably can. But I think Matthew would have noticed some sort of dichotomy or difference between David's personality. I mean, more than anybody else.
I was mostly wondering if he noticed a difference in David's personality during those last few weeks where he was murdered.
I didn't have contact with him at that point, so I didn't notice anything.
Oh,
so
it could have. It's a possibility out there that it could have.
Oh yeah. You know what? I agree.
I don't know, but.
Well, the whole crime scene would have been different, though. It would have been clean. You wouldn't have had 3 different crime scenes in the city. It wouldn't have been so sloppy if it was a Manchurian Candidate or any like MK Ultra, right? We would have had, hey, he did it, and
not necessarily, Greg, because
maybe.
Well, no, they might be able to send with electropulse signals of the Havana syndrome or whatever, and you turn into a robot and you go, it tells you to kill your family like Manchurian Candidate did with other officers and such. But, it's kind of like being, it's almost related to AI now, a robot doing, only X, Y, Z. But the bullet in the ceiling still I question in the motivation. And I think if David was really this depressed or whatever, he would have just went out in the backyard and ate his gun. He wouldn't take it his family.
Spot on with that, and bringing up these types of things, which a lot of the general public still doesn't think we're being sprayed and such. But I digress. You can call them what you want. I say geoengineering, but that just gives us kind of the Looney Tune look, like the flat Earth look, that type of thing. When we talk about that, but I've always, in the back of my head, I always thought, man, this guy, he just got all the funding he needed. He was charging straight ahead to make this movie, and then suddenly all this stuff didn't add up. It added up to somebody who just freaking had a flip switched in his head out of nowhere.
But, I don't mean to interrupt you, but a case I didn't work it, but my old boss, Don Crutchfield, was the private investigator to the stars. His old man was a wheelman. He was on the wrong door raid with Sinatra. DiMaggio and Lawford when they were spying on Marilyn Monroe in the 40s. So I go back a ways on the LA Wheelman PIs. But look at his last case before he died, it was the Gary DeBoer case, where he was a screenwriter and he wrote. I think he didn't do Terminator, but he did one of Arnold's movies. They called the screenwriter with no hands. They found him in outside Riverside in an aqueduct 2 years later with no hands. You know there's something methodical religiously or whatever with no hands, and that's how Kamel was, and David had lost a hand. There's that's a sign. That's a message, you know. And Gary DeBoer, they found him in the aqueduct with no hands, but they said it was an accidental crash, you know.
Sure. Yep. Very familiar with that. I've always thought, are we hurting the case or helping the case, bringing up the direct energy weapon?
I think people need to be educated on that, and you know that and like Matthew will tell you that's 30-year-old technology,
right?
Know?
It's
probably older, right?
Yeah. That's a whole other podcast. You could
right.
It's some of the stuff that they're showing us now for these weapons or these different types of control over people is nothing new. It's just been improved over the years.
Right.
I mean, we were doing mind control experiments on soldiers back in the 20s and 30s, so that way, you know, not sleep and continue the mission, but they were having issues with it because you've seen in TV shows and different movies and comic books, you know, if you take away sleep, you know, soldiers retaliate and they break down. And
well, that's why with Hitler when he got everybody, when they had the speed, I forget it was started with the Petrodrone or whatever, and they got everybody on there. And after the Blitz, they found a lot of Nazi planes that had crashed that were shot down. Is because they were so sleep deprived over like 4 or 5 days, they became lousy pilots. And that's that if you look into the meth and amphetamines when it hit, I mean that started back in like 2019, 27, you know, and that's what they did.
Amphetamines, meth, right?
Yeah, you can also justify that with the Air Force pilots. I can't remember the time frame, but the Air Force pilots that fired on their own while in country, I think it was either Iraq or Afghanistan, and they admitted to being on go pills.
Oh yeah. They
controlled Adderall.
Yeah, you know, a friend of mine was a pilot with Air America back in the day, and they called them greenies, but they're not going to, you know, and we're talking C-130s and stuff, but they're not going to put you in a fighter plane if you're tired. And this is a $500 million, you know, vehicle. You know, you better be wide awake. You know, but every not to get off the subject, but every war with every infantry and everything else had something to boost them. Even we did during Vietnam. I know guys. They said that their ammunition guy and the M60 behind them, he'd line out Bismarcks of meth. And because, you know, that's the only way they could go in there and survive in the jungle, you know, and it made them alert. I mean, they paid for it later with their habits, but that's the only way they survive, you know?
Yeah, Stephen, it's impossible to get off topic. I'm
well, let me
David Crowley covered all these topics. That
let me attempt this because I do want to hear from Catherine here because I think Eric brought up a great question that Catherine, I'm sure you've heard many times. Was David Crowley under mind control? If he was, okay, then, you know, any thoughts on that?
And yeah, because I spent a lot of time studying psychology in college. That's the thing that people don't understand is a human mind is very, very strong. It takes a lot, not only to break the body, but to break the mind. And, you know, they watch movies like Mentoring Candidate and they're like, oh, that's it. They're perfectly normal and everything's great. And then they get this one word and all of a sudden they turn into this killing machine. That's not really how it works. Usually you will see something different in a behavior. They will start to either get real paranoid or you'll see a change like what Matthew was saying, which was I wanted to ask Matthew. It's like there are videos of David, you know, either speaking at the Ron Paul things or just being interviewed. and that came pretty close before the death. So by watching him do these videos, do you see anything different? Do you see a man who all of a sudden looks crazy?
No, he was thoroughly excited. He's a creator, an artist who's on his way. I mean, for anybody who's been in the industry or working in film or animation or video games, when your game or your film comes to light and people are actually interested in the story and producing it and putting money into it, that is a huge step in the industry. So I saw no change in him.
That's a great point she brought up, though, because you had said yourself, Matthew, that you didn't have contact with him for a couple of weeks, and towards the end, when it seemed like the people were noticing a lot of changes in him. David Crowley was being paranoid about people around him, which he should be, because with all due respect, he should be getting paranoid around about the people around him at that time. But some
of the people, right?
So, Catherine, as far as what you had just said, this is a guy who we did see, and you guys have shown it a decline, or not a decline, but a definite change of personality in the last.
It was a change in priorities. I think the only thing I see different, in his quote unquote personality is and he states this in his own journal. He's like, okay, I'm cutting ties with these people who are just trying to suck things from me. They want to ride on my coattails. They want me to take them to LA. They want to get famous because of my work. And I'm not doing that anymore. I don't need you people. And that is a far cry from someone who,
right. I agree.
Yeah,
right. That's the person who's realizing what's going on around him.
Yeah, but the first, I mean, I just got off a pitch with 2 projects after the Hulu deal and everything. It's just to get a pitch in Hollywood is a huge step for any project. To sit down with the producers that want to take a shot at you, whether it goes or not. I mean, that's like 10% of the people that write screenplays. I mean, everybody in LA has a screenplay. Every waitress has a screenplay.
Right.
But to get the pitch and then to get moving on, it's really hard to get a green light. My buddy Eddie Barbini just did the Fauci thing for Masterpieces on PBS, and I pitched him a couple projects 2 weeks ago. One of them was the Crowley case we're going to come up on. And after this Fauci thing, which I thought he's going to get an Emmy on it, I guarantee it. He told me they don't even have a secondary market that's interested after he just launched on PBS with Fauci, the biggest guy in the world. What does that tell you? David broke barriers that people don't understand. It's huge. And the other guys were on his coattails that had no idea what it takes to do that.
Yep.
Yeah, and exactly. And all those guys who were, when you're looking at the narrative, who is it that is saying that David went crazy and David snapped and he was going down this dark rabbit hole? All the ones that he was picking aside. Yep. Every single one. He's like, nope, you're out of here. I'm getting rid of you. And they're the ones who now, and to have so many people follow this narrative and go, oh yeah, see, so-and-so, Danny says he was crazy. Sean said he's crazy. His own family. Well, yeah, these are all people who wanted stuff. And he said, no more.
Yeah, absolutely.
You look at the mics, you look at Hollywood, and they're all like, this was the most put together man we ever saw. But do they want to pay attention to that? No, because it doesn't fit the narrative.
And I can add to that because as serving with David as him being one of my NCOs, one of his quintessential parts of him was that he was very organized. He was very on point with everything he did in the military, with weapons, with any training with us, how he presented himself, his professionalism as a soldier and as a motorman. And when he had enough of something, he let you know, and he did it in his own way. And I could go on an entirely different story about how he presented himself while we were in Afghanistan.
Keep going. I mean, David was one of your NCOs?
Yeah, he was.
Wow. Keep going with that.
I served with him directly. And I remember he was having troubles while he was in Afghanistan. He wasn't getting paid. I remember being at Kandahar, the Air Force base, before it was overrun, and he was not receiving pay. And I noticed that he wasn't with the platoon anymore. So I asked him, I was like, "Hey, bro, what happened? Like, you're not with us?" He's like, "Oh, I quit. I asked to be moved to the mailroom." I was like, that's that is very strange. Like, what happened? And he went on to tell me what was going on. He wasn't getting paid back home, and he had just had enough.
You think, Matthew? You think they might have bumped him up though, and when he went into the company?
I'm not sure what his promotion status was at that. I know he was in line for E6. I do know that, but I'm not sure any more beyond that portion of it. But he definitely just was going through a hard time while he was in Afghanistan. It was not easy to be there.
That was his second tour, though, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. You can't blame him, though, anybody, you know.
Well, no, because I got to the unit 3 weeks right out of basic training, and these guys had been together for a year and a half doing drills and working together and developing a camaraderie. So I showed up very late, and they all took me in under their wing, and David did especially, because we had a connection, because we were both very physically oriented, CrossFit, anything else, we would work out together constantly. And it was just a great camaraderie we had together. So,
Well, it sounds to me like David had some cojones, because at the time, my husband, who, was military at the time, and when he got called up to, first it was Desert Shield, then Desert Storm, and we weren't getting paid either. And he was just I think maybe E3 or E4. So, we didn't have any money. And so when I'm back stateside, my husband's over there in the war, and we're not getting not only deployment pay, we got no, you're getting the basic pay of an E3. And he never stood up for it. I'm like going, I can't pay the bills. And you know how the military is. And I'm not going to get into that because it's a whole nightmare. But if the wife isn't taking care of things at home, then you need to yell at the wife. And it was all them. And so I kept telling my husband, you got to go talk to them. You're getting in trouble. I'm getting in trouble, and it's their fault. And he never did anything. But here, David, he had the cojones to go in there and say, okay, I quit. You guys aren't going to pay me. I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
That took a lot.
It did. It certainly did. And it changed the dynamic of the platoon, because I remember when he spoke to First Sergeant Christopherson, it was just like Sergeant First Class Christopherson at the time. I mean, he was a fair and balanced platoon leader. He was a great leader. And even he was sad to see David go, but he didn't stop him. I mean, David needed to get out because he needed to get paid for what he was doing, and dealing with some of those guys who had been to the first insurgency of the Iraq War. They were under a different type of stress. For most of us who are just coming in to the military, they didn't have ROEs like we did when we went to Afghanistan. They didn't have that kind of rules and regulations.
They didn't have the intelligence then either, did they?
No, they didn't have a lot of the military intelligence that we have now, but it was a totally different aspect. The rules were different. I remember talking explicitly to some of the other soldiers, Eric Duplissa, who was saying, yeah, I mean, if a car rolled up on us when we first went to Iraq, we would shoot the engine block out with the 50 cal. We wouldn't even ask questions. And then all of a sudden you roll around to the time I went to Afghanistan, and we have to put out, ROE signs and raise our hands and throw rocks. It's like, it just didn't work.
Oh, man.
It was a very interesting time. We actually walked around some of the bases. We weren't even amber. Like we would walk around green with no magazines in our weapons. And I'm like, what are we going to do? Throw them at them? I mean, it just makes no sense. I mean, yeah, they got mad at us for walking around red a lot of the time, but we were in open desert for a lot of our tour while we were building FOB ramrods. So it just made no sense with the changes in the ROEs and the directives for the SOPs. It just,
and you mentioned Duplissa. Now, do you talk to him about David? Because I've seen a photo or two of him with David.
I've lost contact with a lot of those guys. Actually, it's very interesting you mentioned that, because one of my best friends out here in Alabama, we served together as well, and in Iraq and Afghanistan. So he's really one of the only people that I've stayed in contact with over the years. It's very strange how the military is a small world. You lose contact with a lot of these guys because the demons that we face, for survivor's guilt, PTSD, however you want to look at it, we don't like showcasing our feelings for the how people view us. Like that statement that she said in the book that he looked crazy. Well, that's a common stigma that most veterans get.
That's
and
being
it's not
mad.
always true.
And it's not always true. Like, I mean, I served in Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, do I look crazy to you guys?
No.
I mean, no. And you guys have talked to me on different levels through different communications. It's like David presented himself as a professional in the military. And whenever I put on the uniform, I wasn't just representing myself, just like David was. He was representing the United States Army. And we all took that into account. But just like in any profession, you're always going to have people who have the rank, but not the maturity, have the way of doing things, but not the understanding of how to treat people. So professional.
And not only that, soldiers are not, just they do not respond the same. Like, for example, when I was in Fort Bragg and I think I just passed my National Registry exam, and there was an accident on the tarmac. I can't remember which plane hit a C-130. Right. So there were soldiers there. A big firebomb. You could see the smoke all over Fayetteville. So I'm looking at this going, oh, holy crap, there's something happened over there. And I couldn't get in until the next day. So when I got to the hospital and stuff, and of course there were injuries, just a massive amounts, just about anything you could think of. Most of them were burns, but I still remember seeing, as I'm going through the ward, that there were soldiers who, broken bones and limbs due to things flying, and those who had half their body burned off, and just how each one responded differently. It didn't necessarily depend on the type of wound they had. It was how they individually responded. There were some that were, catastrophic injuries, and they're just like laughing and joking. They're having a great time. And just one soldier who lost part of his ear and some of his face, catatonic for months. So, to have people lump like people like David or maybe even you and say, oh, they're just suffering from PTSD, they lost their mind because they went to war. It is such a miscarriage of justice. And to put you guys into that situation, it takes so much strength to do what you guys do and what you did. I don't think you guys get enough credit.
Well, and you should also get paid. I think we would all agree that you should get paid. And I'd like to hear more about that. How does David Crowley find himself in a spot where he is serving, where he's over here? How does that even happen where you're over there in harm's danger and you're not getting paid? I feel like I didn't.
It has all to do with the books and how they do their accounting. It was the same thing with us. My husband at the time wasn't getting paid either.
It happens a lot.
Happens a lot. Wow.
To add on to what Catherine was saying, to
That's
lump
ridiculous.
everybody into this little group, just like I know a little group called Conspiracy Theorists, have all been lumped into the same group.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. One of the big things that was in the military, especially with financing, is that paperwork gets lost all the time. If you fill out a leave form and someone doesn't like you, they'll tear it up and make you do it again. If they don't like you, they'll lose your paperwork. I've seen guys change documentation just so that they can get into different schools because they're missing 1 point on their GT score or something like that. Like, just because we don the uniform, it doesn't mean that all people are, sunshine and rainbows and not going to cheat, steal, lie, and get what they need to get ahead.
Yeah, and if you remember, I don't know how old you guys were, but when Desert Shield then turned into Desert Storm, and then I think it was Saudi Arabia, it was one of those countries who then sent a whole bunch of gold medals to give to every single soldier that was in that particular. My husband happened to have been over there. And do you know that every single enlisted guy had the medals were taken, but all of the senior officers, like the colonels and master sergeant, they got theirs, but our soldiers were told, no, you can't have that. That's a bribe. So we got nothing.
What?
Our families got nothing, and our husbands didn't even get the medals.
Okay, yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It
That's
was.
ridiculous.
We were.
I mean, if I work at a fast food restaurant, and if they're not paying me, I'm gonna quit, and that's it. But I mean, these people, these soldiers, they signed their life away for our freedoms. Which to me, I've had family, and served during this same time, and they're taking all of these shots. They don't know what's in these shots, but they are being forced to take all of these
You're
shots.
walking the line to get your
they're-
station band.
they're giving up their freedoms to protect ours, and it frustrates me when I hear that people aren't being paid. That really bothers me.
buy you a freaking cheeseburger, man, if you take one.
And they make more than us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was hard because, back then and at that time, this is some personal information, so most people don't know, but I have multiple sclerosis. So at the time, I was really sick and I couldn't even walk. I couldn't even get up to do anything. Since, I've gone through a lot of physical rehab and stuff. So I can walk now, but back then I couldn't. I couldn't even get out of bed to fix, and I had 2 little kids. And so I couldn't take care of them. You couldn't buy them food, couldn't pay the bills. And I'm telling my husband, I'm like going, get this fixed. We can't do this. What am I going to do? And then I ended up in the hospital. So now I'm in the emergency room. They're admitting me because I was so sick. And then the Red Cross contacts his base where he was over in Iraq, and they had to send him home. Well, then talk about the stigma. He then was shunned because he took the easy way out. He came back. He didn't finish his first tour over there. And it's such BS that these soldiers go through. When I tell you, I mean, my heart is for the military guy. I know what these guys do. I know what they have to go through. I know what they live through because I lived it. Not necessarily everything they did, because I didn't have to go to war, but I was a military spouse for 10 years, and our guys are phenomenal. Our men are amazing. So when people come after David and they want to say that because he was in the military, he was he snapped, dude, I will rip your head off, because I know I've seen guys who have lost their shit. I've seen people who have, well, you don't snap. There's a buildup. There's no such thing as we're walking down the street, snap, I'm going to go kill everybody. But I don't know. I'm going to go off on a tangent. Sorry, but don't attack David if you don't know what the hell you're talking about. I'm going to tell you to shut the hell up.
It's very, very. I've dealt with that stigma a majority of my time after being out of the military, and altercations and everything else. But I will tell you one thing: if anything I learned from the military, it's to control one's emotions, control your ego, and assess the situation. I can tell you, as an infantryman, I had to make those types of choices many times in my career. And David was a excellent practitioner at his job, and I learned a lot from him to be a mortarman. I basically went from basic training to Fort Hood for 3 weeks and then deployed to Afghanistan. I got the baptism through fire. So I had to know my job, and he made it possible for me to be accepted into the unit as a brand new soldier from basic training, and I grew to really develop a great camaraderie with those men. It was a phenomenal time in my life.
Yeah, because you're right. Usually when you're a newbie coming into a group of guys who've been together with all the training, you're not generally accepted right away. So to have David take that step forward to not only welcome you, but then to make you, as the NCO, like not only part of the group, but to be in charge of the group, that's huge.
It seemed to me David had a problem with one of those things you're supposed to do as a military person, and that was to follow orders, because he decided that some of the orders he was following were horrific.
Yes, I can attest to that. We're supposed to follow lawful orders, And when you're on a convoy and you are constantly seeing young children and people on the streets and everything going through the desert, and they're throwing rocks at you, they're doing all kinds of things, you have to be in a matter of nanoseconds be able to make the decision whether you're going to take someone's life or not. And I'll tell you with untrammeled certainty that there wasn't a time over there that I wasn't in some type of mission or combat situation where I didn't feel fear. Okay. There was definitely fear involved, but it's the fact that we kept pushing forward because we knew that the guys to our left and our right were going to be there for us through and through. Anybody who joins the military and says that they went through a firefight and they weren't scared is full of shit. That's just straight truth for you.
Who would have thought that David would have returned from those horrific scenes and went into even more horrific scene? It's just wow. Thank you guys. It's an honor and a privilege to be on this broadcast with both Matthew and Stephen.
I'm just
And Catherine and Greg, of course, but
No. Those two, you got it.
I appreciate everybody here because we're all adding in our own expertise to the situation. And just because I knew David personally doesn't make me any more special than anybody else here on this panel. We all have some type of information to provide everybody else who's looking into this case and the validity of it. It's just
gives you credibility, though.
Yes, that's right. And I just like to make it known that none of this is from pride or ego. This is all to bring justice for David because the man was just brilliant. And I learned so much from him. I mean, there are two major figures in my life that made me into the NCO that I became and the professional that I was in the military. And that's, Michael Williams and David Crowley. They were two men that I looked in the face when I met them. And I was just like, in the back of my mind, it's just like, I want to be like that when I grow up. Okay. I want to be like these men because they were respected. They were sought after for information, but they didn't go around banging their own drum. It was never about pride for them or ego. It was just about being the best version of themselves that they could. And I wanted to emulate that.
Eric, you're muted.
Yeah, that's tough to follow right there. Well said. Just having real men. We're still real men here on this broadcast. Very nice to be a part of it again.
Well, you think of so many soldiers who have served us and so many people that are going to continue to serve us and what they are going through, what they have gone through. And it is just so frustrating when, when people think of soldiers, I don't want them to think that David Crowley, that soldiers just automatically, they all have PTSD and they all end up killing themselves and they all end up killing their families.
And we're all killers.
And they're all killed. I mean, it's just crazy. And then
apparently everybody has PTSD right now.
Right.
Their upbringing. I mean, everybody can freaking claim that now, not just soldiers. Soldiers have seen things and gotten through it.
Well, didn't they used to just call that? Didn't they used to just call that shell shock? Right? I mean, it was all. I mean, whatever they want to put this label on it and say, okay, well that's it, to kind of simplify it for people who don't want to do research, who don't want to actually look into this and actually treat this guy as if he's innocent. And so, yeah, when you hear these words where they say he's crazy. When you hear it from a family member, that's frustrating. When you hear it from a police officer, that's very frustrating too. I mean, because how many times should a police officer say that, and say it on camera, it on camera and say, this guy went crazy.
Yeah. Let's ask Stephen about that. Stephen,
Yeah,
how
let's ask
often
Stephen.
should a police officer say something like that?
How do you hold back?
Well, no, rephrase the question for me.
Well, I mean, how many times have you heard, or how many?
How often?
how often should we say, well, this guy went crazy?
A
This
police
guy went
officer, yeah.
as a
If you're
police officer. Aren't there
Oh,
any standards?
you don't say that. That's it. You know.
And if you say it privately, that's one thing, but if you say it publicly in front of a camera,
Yeah, no, you no. What that crazy? That's a broad brush, man. I mean, crazy for what? Crazy this? I mean, that doesn't narrow it down. That's just a real quick, one word explanation. Crazy, and it ends it right there. What's the definition of crazy? I'm crazy.
Right.
We're all crazy. Probably all crazy
Or-
for doing this podcast.
or
Well,
I-
you know, that's not, that's not a reason.
Correct.
or saying
yeah,
saying that someone snapped, he killed his family, he killed himself. I mean, come on, that's not what police officers should do. That's not what they're paid to do.
You don't say that. No, heck no.
There's a certain level of professionalism that everybody has to take. And when any law enforcement officer or any military personnel uses language like that, that is strictly to drive a narrative.
Right.
And that's how important language is. I mean, they don't call it, the sword of the spirit for nothing. The
Words have meaning.
words have meaning. And it's like, just like any laws that are written, or any lawyer will tell you, the way that the language is written is you remove certain parts of speech to make it so that way it can be a contractual format. That's the whole business with language. And that's why lawyers are hated so much, is because their use of vernacular. That's right. And you follow the rhetoric and you see the lines, you can use language to your advantage to manipulate anybody. So when a police officer gets in front of a camera and tells thousands of people that this guy was crazy, that drives home a narrative. And the first thing people go, oh, there it is. Another veteran went nuts. Like, oh, let's add that. And it's like, hold on, wait a second.
Conspiracy theorist veteran. On top of that,
You guys are nuts for thinking like that. Wait a second. Can't anybody have PTSD? I mean, I think somebody made the claim a while ago that they got PTSD from the comments they were reading on the internet.
Wow.
Anybody can receive PTSD.
I made that comment. That's the thing now.
Right?
It's not PTSD.
It's literally the stigma behind it has made, I mean, I'll use myself as an example, but I mean, I went through hell and high water when I was asking for help back in 2009. I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous. You had guys who were saying, "Oh, you should just suck it up and drive on." It's what we do. I'm like, man, the experiences you may have had, you got through, or you're dealing with it a different way. But some of us need some help with this. All right. And I've seen too many guys, too many females who have been crippled by their demons. And they don't reach out because of the stigma behind it. And
It's almost an insult to military who have gone through the most horrific things you can ever imagine, for people to come out and use PTSD for anything that goes on in your life. My girl left me, PTSD.
right. That's just a
Hell out of here.
right. It's a weak-minded generation.
Disgusting.
Yeah, and there was a TikTok going around about 3 or 4 months ago about a gentleman calling 911 and getting a female dispatcher, and she says, how can I help you? This is 911. He says, I'm having flashbacks again of Vietnam, and I'm holding a knife on. I want to end it. And she talks him down, and you can hear the absolute anguish in this man's voice. Like, he's got nothing left. He doesn't have family to help him. He doesn't have anything. And she talks him down. And this is a guy who served in the jungles of Vietnam. I mean, whatever I faced over there, I had technology beyond measure to protect me. I mean, my IOTV was was full on bulletproof vest with side plates and shoulder pads and everything.
Yeah, but Matthew, you volunteered. Am I correct?
Oh yes.
The difference between Vietnam and you guys serving over in the sandbox
Draft.
is that the draft. There's guys that never should be drafted. It has to be, you know what? That's why we got to get stronger. You want to go into the military. I tested even, but decided I want to be a cop. but you want to go in. You don't want to serve next to a guy that doesn't want to be there.
Right.
That's the bottom line, man.
Absolutely. And I knew guys who were there. You could see it in their eyes. They weren't there to be an infantryman. They were
Or is there to be for a paycheck?
They were
I
there.
mean, look at the incentives to go in the military right now.
Oh yeah. And I won't lie, like when I joined, I mean, I had already had my bachelor's degree. I got bonus on top of bonuses for
bonus on top of bonus. And when you get out, more bonuses to the tune of 50, 60, almost $100,000 for some people.
Oh yeah.
Of incentives. But they don't want to be there.
The bonus.
That's what you're saying. They don't want to be there.
They didn't want to be there. They were just doing it for the bonus.
When it came to combat, that's a different story than getting paid.
Oh yeah, because the bullets.
Yeah, but you know what? Look at that guy Everson from Soundgarden. He after they kicked him out of Soundgarden, he was with Nirvana, and in Soundgarden he went in and he signed up and went over to the Sandbox. You know, I mean, I mean, great interview with Joe Rogan. I give hands.
Wait, one of the guys from Soundgarden?
Yeah, the guy from Soundgarden went in there and he was in the shit.
We're not talking about Chris Cornell, right? Who was obviously
not Chris Cornell. No, the guy.
Child pornography.
No, not Chris Cornell. No, it was his bass player. He was with Nirvana, then Soundgarden, but he's
what's his name?
I think it's Everson or Everson.
Yeah,
the guitarist.
He was a bass player with Soundgarden and Nirvana, and after he was out of
my bad for interrupting.
Yeah, but I give that guy my hats off to that guy.
Yeah, I mean, when
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
you had Chris Cornell, an activist against child trafficking, who hung himself supposedly, where his knees.
Yeah.
And then you had another person from Soundgarden that was equally awake. Fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating that put aside that everything that is happening right now. Let's put aside all of it, right? Let's look at what's the truth behind it. It's all a narrative, and it's all to show us that control is by the elites. And this is a sure case of that with what David went through. If you have information that people don't want out there, they're going to find a way to make it so you can't get it out there. And that's up until including your life, which is what happened with David. And he had information that I'll share with you guys that would astonish anybody at that time period. I mean, the underground dumb bases, the child trafficking, everything else in his classified documents leading up to, pipelines and everything else. I mean, he had information that people shouldn't have. And that's what got him killed.
Yeah, and what better way to discredit what he was going to tell the world? Tell everybody he's crazy.
Well, that's right. But he had information. Maybe Matthew had some of it, or whatever. But David took it one more step and created a project that the whole world might see. Yep. Because there's guys like Matthew that do a little here or there. We're doing our thing here. David was going to announce this to the globe, the world, man. Here's this is my project and everything else. And it like I said, it was going to ruffle some feathers because he took what a lot of guys maybe knew, but he put it into the content and context of something that's going to be, called entertainment or what have you, that is gonna cause a storm.
A ripple.
Boom!
You drop a pebble in a pond, you get ripples.
Boom!
Boom, bro. Like seriously, like
he nailed it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you put on the full armor of Yahweh, and you're going to get fiery darts shot at you no matter what. And he was trying to speak the truth, and that's all we need to do. And no matter how you slice it, he was on his way. Yeah. He was a brilliant young filmmaker on his way, and I couldn't have been more proud of him when he actually, remembered that, hey, this guy went to animation school. Let me see what he thinks about this. And he would call me up, and I would have conversations with Mitch and him, and talking about like tank tread animations for like the opening sequence of the trailer. And I was just like, hey, let me see what I can do here. It was fantastic times. He was so excited.
Let's talk a little bit about those talks then. So you've actually spoke with Mitch Heil too.
Oh yeah, we had conversations when I was back in Ohio when they were working on hard surface modeling for the tanks. Back in that time period of like 2009, 2010, a lot of computer modeling programs were having trouble with hard surface modeling, like metallic objects or anything that had to do with armor or with a very like different type of shape or an armor type of shape. So they were contacting me about how to make tanks, make it look more realistic, the animation of the treads, because if anybody who's done any type of Python scripting or Java scripting or any type of scripting in 3D animation programs, it's not easy. And you have to, it's not plug and play like it is now. You actually have to design the actual animation feature on the actual model to work with the actual animation that you're trying to produce. So they were saying, how do we get these tank treads to work? And I was like, hey, let me see what I can find. And I went to the forums and who knew it? This one coder who's a nerd like me was just like, hey, I got a tank tread animation thing to work and you can use it on your models. It's a free script. And I like looked at it and I was like, hey, maybe this will work for you. And they ended up using it. It was fantastic.
That's awesome. So was that some of the stuff that was in the 2012 trailer or some of the wow.
When the tank
yeah,
the screen right there, that's all 3D animated with the animated script that I had helped them with. That way back then.
Wow.
I didn't make a script or anything. I just helped them find it, and I did some tweaks and stuff to the actual animation process, and actually helped them out with it so they could use it. And it turned out really well in the trailer.
Hey,
So-
Matthew. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, Greg.
No,
I'm sorry. I was just going to ask Matthew a question.
Yeah.
Matthew, did David speak about this project or something similar while you guys were serving together?
Oh, yes. I mean, he talked about his t-shirt company. We were talking about different designs and different ideas for that. I think it was called Bullet Time for the, or I can't remember what the t-shirt company was over the years, but it's been a while. But I remember that conversation and that he was putting together a film. And did you want to work on it? Did you want to help? I mean, when we got back to Fort Hood, he was ETSing and he found out that I had re-enlisted and he was like, you're fucking stupid. Like that was his exact words. I was just like, my wife wanted to stay in and I've enjoyed the military. He was just like, man, I'm going to Full Sail. I'm going to get my film degree. And I was like, hey man, if you ever need help with something, a project, and you can always contact me. And that's how we stayed in contact over the years. It was phenomenal.
So I know we've talked about David in Full Sail a couple times. So he goes from Full Sail, which is that like an online?
Oh no, he went to the actual physical campus in Florida. It's in Orlando, Florida. It's one of the most prestigious film schools out there. And literally the only reason I chose it for my master's degree is because David went there. And when some of my instructors found out that David had been a student there as well, they were very honored that I fulfilling my dream, but also prolonging David's memory, because everything that I learned from him reflected in my life as a professional in that field, because he was so passionate about it. Now, I had been in the field before he was, but he just brought a level of professionalism to the military that I had never seen before. And he brought it outside of that too in all of his works. And his expertise with weapons and turning them into actual weapons that can fire blanks and everything was absolutely ingenious with the different modifications he made to the weapons that he had. And he was showing me this stuff, and it was absolutely fantastic. And then for him to come to me and ask me questions made me feel great, because I had never really made it in the industry like he did. I was just, a 2D animator that knew a lot about computers, and I did a lot of freelance stuff, but he was actually in the doorway, and it was so exciting to see a friend of mine make it. I was proud of him on a level that most people would probably show empathy, or jealousy or empathy for it. I was more along the lines like, yeah, bro, you go. Like, this is rad.
Sorry I bounced out of there, but I heard part of it. No, that I just was wondering. Thank you.
No worries.
So, sorry, go ahead, Catherine.
I was just going to say, so basically, what I'm getting from you is David was an expert with weapons. He knew how to handle one. He knew what to do with one. He knew.
Absolutely. I'll never forget it during one of the operations we did. I handed him my M4 with the receiver to the back. You know, I had it locked in place. He's like, "Why is this like that?" And I was just like, I didn't know how to answer him properly because, you know, I literally had just gotten out of basic and I was just like, "This is what they had me do in basic, so I don't know." And he was just like, "Calm down, it's okay. Just next time, make sure your receiver is forward when you hand it in, and I'll do the check." And I was just like, "Roger that, son." And I mean, I never really heard the guy yell at all. He was very matter of fact, and if he had to raise his voice, it was for a good reason.
So maybe people, just because he was so direct, they would take it as, oh, he's yelling at me, but he's just being direct. Like, hey, you know.
Stoic. I mean, a lot of people mistake my passion for anger or, you know, just being on drugs when really in reality, I'm just a happy person. And it's just the light that's inside us. And David had that same kind of energy. He just showed it differently.
Were there any times where David got angry or mad?
In my experience with him over the years, I never had that kind of altercations with him. He was just very matter of fact, and we hung out. We ate at the chow hall together, and he was a normal dude. I never had any issues with him, just like he didn't have any issues with his father-in-law, really.
So he was your superior.
Yes,
at some point, right?
he was one of my NCOs. He was one of my non-commissioned officers, E5, when I was in E4.
So he was an E6, E7,
No, he was E5 at the time.
E5.
Mm-hmm.
Did he ever discipline you?
Oh no.
Did you ever see him? Did you ever see him discipline other people?
Yes. As far
What did that look like?
Yeah, what did that look like?
We could actually smoke people back then, and you know, when guys were being stupid and privates were being dumb, you know, he was out there. And he was just like, he was being an NCO.
Can you think of any memorable moments, any worst case scenarios, best case scenarios, or anything that stands out?
The one thing that stands out to me is that when I came to the unit, CrossFit was huge, and I had already been participating in CrossFit as a personal trainer back before I had joined the military and as a professional fighter for MMA. And I came in and I had already had experience with it, so they were doing,
Wait, what?
yeah. I've done a lot with my life, guys. So it's you know, the military wasn't enough for me. I had to do other things too.
We're gonna have to connect after the show.
Find him on TikTok.
We call that being a sucker for punishment.
But it's true. It's just like people are like, why do you want to fight for a living? It's literally because, you know, it's the only time you can go into a cage, fight somebody, and not go to jail.
Boys being boys. It's
Right.
boys being boys. Man, we shake hands afterward. We go out and have beers.
Yeah, the beer, right? Pat you on the back.
Beer.
That's a great right hook, dude. You know, that uppercut was brutal. But,
Yeah, great your hand, fucker.
yeah, right? It's great. But I remember we were doing a CrossFit session there in Fort Hood. It was one of the first PT sessions I was there. And we were all wearing our plates. We were wearing our SAPI plates. And our IOTVs were doing pull-ups and running. And this one kid just wasn't doing the exercises right. I think his name was Cole. And he just couldn't do the pull-ups anymore. And Crowley brought him over and got him in leading rest position. And just like, if you can't do the pull-ups right, you can't lift the dude out of the tank. You can't do your job, blah, 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 blah. You got to keep going. I mean, it was just awesome to see somebody else as motivated as I was for fitness. I was like, yeah, let's go. And it was just a great CrossFit workout PT session.
So instead of just yelling at him too, he's like saying, hey, there's a reason behind why you need to be fit.
Exactly.
You gotta save your guys.
Right? You got to be able to pick up a dude who's got an extra 36, 40 pounds on his body and lift him out of a burning tank or lift him out of a whatever situation you're in. And this kid was just weak-minded. But then, you know, I jump up on the pull-up bar and I'm just like knocking these out. And he's just like, where the fuck have you been? Like I was that guy in basic where I was the, you know, false motivation is better than no motivation at all. So, when you're in front of a bunch of privates who just got back from, Christmas leave, and you have to go back to basic and they don't want to be there. I mean, we had to do overhead arm claps for like 30 minutes straight. And I'm just in the front of the formation, just going, let's go, can't smoke a rock. This is how we do it. And everybody's like, I hate you. And I'm just like, well, at least you hate me and not the drill sergeants.
Hey, so Matthew, you had your bachelor's degree. Did they offer you OCS?
Oh, yes. I was offered OCS direct select, actually, while I was in basic. And I kept getting the same wisdom from the other NCOs, my senior drill instructor, Drill Sergeant Murphy, and Drill Sergeant Doug Leash, that go enlisted first. Go enlisted for a few years and
Right.
learn what it's like to be in the trenches and learn what it's like to be an NCO and then apply for OCS.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And so at that time, the powers that be, or the commander, the captain that was in charge, who was also SF, he was like, you know what? If OCS is available for you and you have this direct select option, I would take that. So I ended up taking his advice, but at the time my GT score wasn't where it was supposed to be, and I needed to get to a unit so I could start receiving some of my bonuses that I was using to pay off my student loans. So at that point, I just decided to go the NCO route, and then finally OCS was brought back to me in about 2010, around the time that Sergeant Ziegler was killed at Fort Hood. I was there that day too.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah, I was on base that day. I was literally supposed to go with him that day to that, and I got called to a detail to unload furniture for some of the soldiers coming back.
Somebody's looking out for you.
Yeah, Yahweh. I wasn't supposed to be there, and I remember that day clear as watching my son being born. It was horrific. I mean, I was literally 2 blocks away when it happened.
Wow.
Yeah, less than that. So it just goes to show you that no matter what you do in this world, there's always somebody looking out for your best interests, and it's outside of our understanding.
Yep.
That's right.
For sure.
Well, that may be a great place to end this here, unless anybody else has any other comments or anything else that we want to cover. I know you had mentioned Mitch Heil, so obviously I wanted to. I was taking notes about that, but because Mitch Heil and David Crowley signed up at the same time, so they were both part of it. Any military experiences with Mitch Heil? Did I miss that?
I did not know him personally in the military. I only knew him outside of it, but
Okay.
I know that they both joined together at the same time. Yes, and they were good friends at one point.
Okay.
Yeah, but Mitch had come to me for help with the tank animation. We emailed back and forth and discussed it and hard surface modeling. So I helped him out with that.
All right. Well, definitely want to thank everybody for joining us here. If anyone has any final thoughts, anything else that they want to add to this, otherwise, I would love to have us all back in the future, and we'll continue to talk about this case. And I want to thank everybody for being here, for caring about this case, first of all, for asking questions, for answering questions. And Matthew, can you tell people where they can follow you? Where can they follow you? Where can they find you?
Certainly, you can find me mostly on TikTok right now. I'm the Warrior for Yeshua. I have about 38.9 thousand followers right now, and I do it to showcase.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not big or huge. I don't do it for money. I do this to showcase the grace, love, and mercy of Yeshua HaMashiach as our Messiah, and I preach the good news to anybody who will listen. And if I could, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to pray for everybody on the panel and for everybody here. So if I got to have you guys just bow your heads for just a quick second, let me just do that.
Yes, sir.
Master and Creator Elohim of this divine matrix, I ask that you grant us your love, grace, and mercy upon all of these people here on this panel and everybody who's going through the tribulations of this life. Because blessed are you, Yahuwah, forever and ever, for giving us the glory of kingdom of heaven in Messiah. I mean,
Amen.
Amen.
yes, indeed.
Thank
Thank you for having me, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. And all I want to do is show people the truth and bring justice for David. And if I can do that with proper language, love, grace, and mercy, and that's what I'm going to do. And I can see that in all of your eyes, that all you care about is the truth and bringing David's story to light. And I'm going to fight back tears, but I love the man. And if I could have him back, it wouldn't even be words. It would just be, I would just hug him.
Are there any other soldiers out there who may feel the same way you do, that may be willing to talk to us, that may be willing to just help us, because he has been slammed so much and it's so unfair. And because I'm not a soldier, people, oh, Greg doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to that. I've watched First Blood, right? I've seen these movies, but when you have people that have actually served with David, I have not found, well, aside from Joseph Seaton, I've not found one soldier that is talking negatively about David Crowley to the point where they believe that David Crowley did this, that they believe David Crowley did this. I believe Joseph Seaton believes it, but I also think Joseph Seaton was also there. And I know you know who Joseph Seaton is too.
Personally.
This is a guy who was there, who was one of those people David Crowley was kind of wiping off, and at some point he's like, dude, I can't deal with this. And we all have those yeah, exactly, Eric. It's just like, I can't deal with this right now. Okay, it doesn't mean we can't be friends later, it doesn't mean anything else later, but I mean, at some point it's like David Crowley was clearly distancing himself from some of these people. It's sad that it was a soldier that David Crowley had served with, I guess. So I don't know if you know, and I know we've talked about this in our last conversation, but any thoughts about the Joseph Seaton? Because I don't know that much about him.
Before my emotions get the better of me,
Okay.
take a moment and I had an interesting professional relationship with Seaton. I mean, from on the outside, everything looked good, but when I was contacted by him for helping him with something that he was working on in animation, and we had mentioned Crowley, his first response was, "Oh, he did it. He murdered them all." And I was like, "What? Like, are you serious?" And
That's true courage, Matthew. To
and I mean, this is
say that,
right. And I was,
as far as the code,
I was like, "Wait a second." I was like, "Hey, you're still in, right?" And he was just like, "Yeah." And I was like, I'm retired, bro. That's not how it happened. And he didn't like that at all. He didn't like.
You saw some red flags. You're not pointing fingers. You saw some red flags.
I saw red flags, and I was just like, "No, man. This anybody can see right in front of them. This looks wrong." And he just did not like the way I was speaking about it. And I was like, "Okay, well, that's your opinion, and I'm giving you mine. And I don't really care what you think anymore because you're not my superior."
1A, baby.
I mean, I may respect the rank, but that doesn't mean I have to like you as a person.
True.
So as far as that was concerned, after I did the work for him and didn't get paid, imagine that. I kind of just distanced myself from him because his narrative and his opinions were not in line with mine, and I didn't like the energy he was putting out. So I was just like, you know what? If he believes that and this is how he feels, I don't think I need to know you. And then I cut ties many years ago.
How many other soldiers do you think may feel the same way that you do, or may feel the same way that Joseph Seaton does? If you had to guess, just in your opinion.
Hypothetical, I would say a majority of people probably think there was some type of foul play done with Crowley's murder. A lot of soldiers would think there was foul play.
How many will step up to the mic and actually talk about it, though?
They're afraid.
Right.
They're terrified. I mean,
why?
Because of what We
What
have been
happened to David? That's
David. I mean, there's proof right there, and look at what's happened to other people who have been silenced. I mean, you said yourself that Eric has been banned on YouTube. I've been banned on TikTok for videos because people thought I was being racist. I mean, you get all kinds of different.
Well, you're white, so obviously you're racist.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm
You're white, you're racist automatically.
I'm talking about, flat Earth, or I'm talking about biblical cosmology or something like that. Flags my account because I'm giving false information. It happens to all types of creators. And as far as people thinking the way Seaton did, I mean, I think a vast majority think that it was murder suicide because they see the narrative and they're not willing to dig into it because it's right here, it's right in front of my face. That must be the truth. But you got to peel back the layers, and that's the first thing I did when my wife and my ex-wife now told me about it. She was like, "Whoa, something's not right here," and I'm like, "Yeah, something is not right here. David would not do this. This is not the man I know." Not being so close to getting Gray State. I mean, no way.
I have spoke with Greg several times about possibly picking up parts of David's script and making it into a movie.
We should.
Well, that's Greg.
We should. You got
here might be able to freaking pick up where he left off.
you got your expert panel here.
I mean, the main
Talk
thing is
about it for real.
You have to get David's name cleared first.
Yes.
I don't think that any company, any Hollywood, maybe
that movie's not going to get made.
Well, Steve, I can speak to this too. Is like, who is going to want to fund a film where this was created by somebody that they say killed his wife, killed his 5-year-old daughter, and killed himself? Who is going to fund that? And that makes the whole Danny August Mason, all these people who tried to move forward with the project after David's death, that is a whole nother issue. But what Hollywood company in their right mind, and maybe we're talking about Hollyweird, so maybe they're not in the right mind, but even those people,
only a company in their right mind would pick it up.
There is no company, even with everything happening in Hollywood, Stephen, what company is going to touch this project?
Well, it's all private money now. There's no studios left. It's that who's bottom line is who's going to invest in something that's never going to be seen? Okay, that's it. I mean, his narrative is, like I said, it ruffled feathers, and I still think it's a black ops, shadow ops hit that was done with amateurs.
Agreed.
And so, I mean, yeah, try to clear his name, but there's never been a movie made about Gary DeVore, the screenwriter with no hands. There's been documentaries, but that's as far as it goes.
In addition to who's going to pick it up, who's going to actually have the balls to make it? I mean, when you're sacrificing your life and your family's life.
Well, exactly. The guys that did the documentary on Gary DeVore, all of a sudden they made it at the very end of the documentary. Now this guy's scared. He talked to Gary DeVore's wife. He went to LA. He's from England. It's a great documentary. But at the end, he admits that he lied, and he didn't lie. But they made him do that. They threatened his family.
Admitted it.
Exactly. So with this here, Netflix, Hulu, Sony, Spot, whatever. There's no platform that's going to take it. They're not going to touch it.
Right.
But if you soften it down a little bit and take out, the Terminator, Transformer. I think there's a little too much shoot 'em up stuff, but if you go with it like V for Vendetta, take that for instance. That comes into now, right? So take V for Vendetta, that got produced, but it wasn't super graphic. It's almost go back into the mindset and go with what the thoughts and produce it like that instead of it's a new world order and all of a sudden, the CCP and everybody's coming over with guns and we got, take the Civil War aspect out of it and go more logically with it. I think it could be made that way.
Yeah, I was going to throw in there too. We can also, not look at this as a film anymore, and you could actually take Gray State and turn it into a game.
Yeah,
you could do that. That's how a lot of movies started as games too.
Documentary.
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot in the independent indie film or indie game industry right now where I've seen just this new, I mean, segue, but it's a way to get the message out there. And I just saw what they're capable of doing with the new Unreal Engine 5, where they made a first-person shooter that looks so realistic that people can't tell it's a game. Because
what was the name of the game again?
It doesn't have a working title just yet. It's just one level, but this guy's been working on this game for like the last 3 years, and I mean, I'll send you guys the link of it because I just discovered it. But the new Unreal Engine allows you to not have polygon counts for your models. They're millions upon millions of polygons. So what this has done for us is it allows us to create these environments that are so lifelike that it's like you're looking at real footage. And these people were watching it, and it's like a handy cam type footage, that the way the gun reacts and the way he fires it, it's so realistic. I was like, imagine being able to take Gray State, just the way David wrote it, just the way he wanted to produce it as a film, put it into a game, was like an open world type, you know, situation, and give people like side quests, the actual mission, and then direct it not only as, you know, the Gray State
There you go.
work in David's murder into it with all the facts and everything.
Unreal
Oh, yeah,
Engine.
there you go. Exactly. You know, start kind of toward the end of his military service. He quits. He has an idea. He goes in. He starts producing this stuff. The other thing too is, you know, you get Alex Jones, Jordan Peterson, and RFK Jr. You know, you got the pandemic and vaccines. RFK Jr. You got Jordan Peterson, who goes against every narrative, and you have who's the other one I said? Oh, anyway, but you know, like, you know, Alex Jones, whatever I'm saying is that, yeah, but try to get those people involved in a project and cover all aspects of it, and take out a little bit of the violence and stuff, and you know, maybe, you know, go from there. I mean, you know, that's a great idea. The game, you know, start it off as a game. No one's going to stop the game. No one.
I was going to say if she would actually play it, that'd be rad.
Let's get rich and buy an island somewhere away from all this craziness. From a game.
But see, and David's character could be in an alliance and a horde because he's on both sides of, you know what I mean? He would be horde going against the
right.
side.
I mean, you could add all kinds of different aspects into this. So, you know, a leveling system, you could add in weapons, you can add in, you know, when you're engaging with a character, you have multiple options to choose from and what you respond with. Like, you know, it could be an inquisitive question about the situation, or which direction to go, or different options, kind of like what Horizon Zero Dawn gives you, or a choose your own adventure book from like the 70s. Like, if you choose this aspect, it'll take you in this direction to the story, and you can get alternate endings, kind of like what they did in Heavy Rain back on PlayStation 3.
Oh. Yeah. Okay, and we need to, you know, throw this little caveat in there. All right, Danny August Mason, Sean Wright, and all you other people, you can't take this idea. It's our idea.
You cannot copyright.
Yeah, there you go. It does not belong to you.
Right? I mean,
Well,
What?
They think it does.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, if I could reach out to some of the people I know who are still in the industry, and I'd see if they'd be interested in just doing a side project like this, maybe design a level and throw some characters in there. And
Awesome.
I mean, if you guys would be interested, I would love to see something like that, because the power of video games is that you're hitting about, I mean, what is it? In 2016 alone, gamers spent 3 billion hours online. All right. And I mean, if you want to talk about something that's bigger than Hollywood, the game industry is bigger than Hollywood.
You don't want to know how much I play.
Yo, Tegan. Not as many hours, but I love gaming.
Just on Call of Duty alone, like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, that, you know, has come out in season 3, I put in almost 8 days into that game. And it's like, you know, these are people who are super nerds. We're not just nerds. We're super nerds. We're the type of guys that like we'll sit there and we'll look at every nuance of the game, like from light refraction to how characters move to how their articulation of words to the animation of the weapons. I mean, now you're getting into my niche. Well, I could talk about this forever, but I would love to see that happen, to see David's vision come to life.
Oh yeah, I'm telling you, seriously, I would play. I mean, right now on World of Warcraft, I think I have like eight or nine characters that are all level 70. They're maxed. And if you know anything, that's a lot of gameplay.
That's a lot of time.
Oh yeah,
That's a lot of raids.
And just because we're gamers doesn't mean we won't knock your ass out in real life either.
Oh,
Exactly,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I'm known for having a
Yeah,
I
that's right.
ask questions.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Catherine has a great right hook. That's all I'm gonna say on that. Not that I've ever experienced it, but she just gives me that vibe.
Well, if we get a chance,
No, I'm a nice person.
No, I'm sure, but if your push come to shove,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can get Gamer Dads in play sometime. That'd be great. I haven't played World of Warcraft in a long time, but I'd love to get back on that and start that again. That'd be so much fun.
well,
But,
I mean, David talked about gaming, and he talked about making like a gray state type of a game, and so it's interesting. Did David ever talk to you about any gaming thing? Anything? Nothing like
no,
that.
that's just something that just popped into my head just right now with the technology that we have. I mean,
Nice.
the Unreal Engine is free. You can download it for free and you can work with it. You just have to pay for certain aspects of it. And,
Unreal Engine.
yeah, the Unreal Engine 5, and you just have to have a computer that can support it. Now, I mean, I wish I had that right now, but gee whiz, I would jump on that. And actually, I do have a Shadow PC. It's a full-fledged gaming PC that I stream from in a data center, and I have access to a gaming PC. So I'm gonna start working on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to say a bad word only because there has to be a character, and the character's name has to be the motherfucker. Okay.
Okay.
And those who know the case know who that is.
We'll call him, TMF. He'll have like
You just call me Prometheus.
a patch on a fucking biker jacket. That.
And Shawn Wright goes run. I'm Shawn motherfucking Wright, so it has to be the motherfucker. So okay.
Yeah.
I've never had a chance to be on a show with him.
Like I'm the motherfucker.
That's
Sorry,
got to be the villain.
I'm a bad influence, guys. I gotta go.
That's got to be the Bowser of the Super Mario.
Oh man, that's funny you mentioned it because I came up with an idea that I pitched to Activision a few years ago that like every time you're in multiplayer and you get a kill, like you could change the sound effect that it does when you get the kill. Like it's a Mario like coin, or it's like the Sonic coin, or like got you motherfucker, like Tim Jackson.
I'm hearing Sean's character every time Sean would get hit, he'd be going, ow.
Yeah, right. We can make it sound like a cat meowing or like that would be hilarious.
Oh my god! I'm sorry, we're way off topic. Sorry.
No,
I know.
I was expecting Eric to be.
Mike's
more
like,
off
anybody
topic.
has final thoughts? 5 hours later.
it's summer goodbye.
That was my final thought.
I was getting ready to let up a promo at the end of the show about an hour ago.
Oh my God. I truly appreciate being able to be on this panel, guys. I look forward to doing any other podcast with you, and I will send you all the information I have of those other messages. And I'm going to pursue this game idea. I think it would be a fantastic
I do too.
way to showcase this story. So I'll get together with you guys. I'm excited right now.
Awesome.
So I appreciate you guys having me, and I look forward to it next time.
Thank you, brother. Any final words, Matt? I guess that was Matthew's final words,
no,
right?
I'm just waiting.
No, I mean, if you haven't, because I want to go around the panel and get some final thoughts, some final words here. So, Matthew, again, thank you so much for joining us. I hope to have you a part of more of our shows here. And any final thoughts, any final words? I get more questions every time I have you on. I've only had you on twice, so I get a lot of questions here. But we're going to get a lot of more questions. What is this thing? Oh, he talked about this. Oh, he talked about this rank. Well, what is this rank? I don't know. I have no idea what it is, but I can write it down and I can ask him later on.
I'd be happy to answer any questions for you, but if I can leave with one final thought, it would be this, is that yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That's why Yahweh made it the present.
Amen.
Amen, brother. Amen, brother. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Great rest of your day.
Thank you, my friend. All right, Catherine, any final words, any final thoughts here?
Not really. I'm kind of still stuck on the but yeah. Sorry. Oh yes. Just what I am grateful for. Okay, I do have something to say. Oh, who'd have thought? I am grateful for people like Stephen and for Matthew, and even for Eric and everybody else who has had the courage to come forward and to state, the obvious, and, regardless of what it could or could not mean for them personally. And, they're all doing this for truth, not for accolades and not for anything else, but because they have a love of the truth. And I just want to say thank you, because without all of these people, I'm not sure where we would be. But as of right now, I think as far as the case goes, we're in a really good place. So thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Always appreciate.
Yeah, thank you.
Thoughts here. Let's go to Stephen. Stephen, do you have any final thoughts, any final things you want to say before we shut this one down?
No, I do, Greg. It's even regarding my book, Ultimate Prey, on Amazon.
Yes, sir.
That was a case, and somewhat similar to this, where the law enforcement narrative was a totally 180 degrees the other way, and we were citizens and bounty hunters and PIs and went after this case, and I wrote a book about it. And even though they didn't convict and sentence Kerry Stayner for the crimes along with other people, he was a lone killer, let's say. But we went after the truth, and I think that the court of public opinion believes us. Just like with the Crowley case, you're fighting City Hall on this thing, and just like with the Yosemite murder case, the FBI was involved and discounted me on that case. And years later, I got word, and I even talked to Nick Rossi, who was special agent in charge out of Sacramento, in so many words a few years ago, said I was right. And I think, I shouldn't say, I think I know we're right on this thing. And we're going against law enforcement narrative, and there's a lot of resistance for people who listen to that, like Kenneth Maines and all these other guys. But I say we keep plugging along, and I think eventually somebody's going to have to do something about this case.
Well, yeah, I mean, people can use your book as a study guide for other cases. This is a big case. You
Sure.
have actually, you've dealt with some of these things. People have said things to you that led you to the Yosemite murder case, that led you to say, wait a minute, maybe there's some other suspects here. I mean,
Right.
that happened. All of that happened.
Stephen, can you show the book again so I can, and give me the name so I can write it down?
Sure, it's that's what it looks like. Ultimate Prey. So it's
Ultimate
on
Prey.
Amazon. Yeah,
It's on
Amazon.
Amazon. Yep.
Thank you.
But it kind of falls into the same narrative, in a roundabout way of questioning law enforcement and their investigation.
I'll be ordering it right after the show.
Oh,
Yeah.
Hey,
Now
thank
you were this whole case really started with you, Stephen, because you were just collecting on a bonds, right? You were a bondsman, right? Is that right?
right. I bailed a guy out of Tuolumne County, California, and then the murders happened, and his proximity of where his residence was to where they found bodies, his MO, his previous, half his life in prison for rape and drugs, everything else, and he was good to go. And when I go to Alabama, they have one suspect. When I get out of there, they now name 9 suspects. And my 2-day stint in Alabama, when we caught him jumping on bond, it went from
What's his name? What's his name?
Paul Candler Jr.
Okay.
So it went from the narrative, and I brief detectives in California that I'm going to go to Alabama, arrest this guy, and the FBI calls me that night in my hotel room. They follow me back and
The
told me to quit
FBI.
handing out. Yeah, the FBI. Yeah, they quit handing out wanted posters. And that night at midnight, when we kick his house, the deputies in Jefferson County, Alabama, have the wanted poster in their back pockets and inform me that my guy's now the #1 manhunt in Alabama, all within 48 hours. How does that happen?
Yeah, they got it all figured out. they looked through a window and boom, it's all done. They got it all figured out. So how does that, I mean, is there anything that Paul Candler said to you that led you to think that maybe what the public thought about the Yosemite crime scene murders, the Yosemite sightseer murders, that this guy may have been involved? Did he say anything specific to you when you were talking to him?
And
Paul
now
Candler.
you're in my wheelhouse too, working for the DNR.
Oh, you would love this case, Eric. You would love this case. Yeah, Eric, if you haven't looked into the Yosemite sightseer murder, if you haven't looked into the Carrie Standler? Is that
Carrie Standler? Yeah.
So, I mean, if you haven't looked into that, I mean, this book is, it's
well, you know what? Eric, it still plays because I just did a Hulu deal last year, and this happened 1999. Why is Hulu still interested, or anybody 22, 23 years later, right? JonBenet Ramsey, you haven't heard about that thing in a couple of years. And then 3 weeks ago, FBI agent Jeff Reinig did a podcast with Emily Campagno on Fox. So why is this case still being brought up if it was solved?
Did you just say JonBenet Ramsey case?
Yeah, but this has even gone past that with the interest in media groups and production companies still talking about this case. Why after 23 years?
Well, and this is all indirectly tied to the story that everybody knows. I know my first name is Stephen.
Correct. That's the backstory of my story with his brother. Exactly.
And I just shared it in the chat, folks. The link is in the chat where you can go to Amazon and purchase Ultimate Prey and learn some truth.
Yeah, and if you want to know what it was that Candler said to Stephen, you have to get the book and then read chapter 20.
Oh,
there you go.
No, Kent. When we caught, we had a 48-hour manhunt. It was a statewide manhunt, and we actually, like I said, I ended up fighting with him out of the hotel room in Fultondale, Alabama, and we arrested him, and we took him to the hospital because it was a little fight. Is that when in the hospital, he told my partner he felt sorry for those women in Yosemite, and before that, 8 hours earlier, when we hit the house with Jefferson County, his girlfriend thought my partner and I were the FBI. I mean, that, like I said, not too many people run from California to Alabama. It usually goes the other way. So yeah, no, the writing was on the wall. But when you read the book and it ends, it's a nice solid ending where the law enforcement was saying that, Steve, you were right.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's all part of here, chapter 20. And just to give you guys a quick little snippet, it says, "Tell me, man, what did he say? He said he thought we were feds and wanted to question him about the Yosemite murders." Rick paused for effect. Then he said that he felt sorry for them. Them? I asked I asked, feeling a twist in my guts. "The girls," Rick answered. Great book, guys. You got to get it.
Hey, thank you. My biggest 3 fans.
Yeah, no, I'm telling you, that's just a great book. So obviously, there was something that drew you to the David Crowley case that was similar, or was it just?
100% spot on. You know what? Same narrative, which was the wrong narrative. Easy to close the book for law enforcement. Suicide, homicide. 90% of the sheep out there will believe that. And you know what? I mean, they just caught 5 LAPD guys selling guns to the cartel at the border here in San Diego. Okay. So, you know what? Law enforcement has its problems. They had their problems back then. And, when we got 51 CIA guys signing off on a laptop too. So, you know what? It's out there, people, you gotta pave your own roads, and go with what you really believe. Go with your gut.
That's right. All right, my friend. Eric, any final things you want to say here, or else we'll shut this one down here? Catherine, anything? I know Catherine.
What an amazing show. The two guests, wow, they should be part of the regular broadcast for sure.
Yeah.
I have to close out. If you want, I'll present it. Make sure it sounds okay. A little tribute to David I made here. Hopefully it doesn't get your station nuked.
Yeah, we'll see. You never know.
So
Thanks.
Eric, I want to say, Eric, you have your own podcast, right?
I used to. Now I'm banned from YouTube. So Greg's taking a big risk to even have me on.
Yeah, I think Eric is on his 37th ban right now.
No, but I've been banned and kicked off, but I cannot even create a station now. They don't let me.
Oh my God. Well, Greg, we'll use your station and we'll do something else.
You got it, my friend.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Stephen.
you all. And God bless you all. And
Thanks,
we
Eric.
will be back here very soon. Here we will continue for justice for David Crowley and family.
Expect me. Welcome to the resistance.
You got to share it,
I know
brother.
your word, honey. Believe me, there ain't thing to be worried. We're absolutely going to get him back. There ain't no question about that. We'll get him back. That's just all there is to it. Hey, you want to know another thing? I'm going to be a